Chapter 575. When they walked out of the square, Mo, who had been missing for a long time, finally showed up. He hurriedly said, wait for me, I'll go with you." Ning Shu saw that he was wet as if he had just swam in the river. She laughed and said, "Where did you go?" Mo looked at his wet clothes, which faintly exuded a wonderful smell. He said sadly, "Don't mention it. I'm so unlucky. I just saw a strange person in the square. It seemed that he was quietly following you, so I quickly followed him. I didn't expect that person to be so vigilant. I was discovered when I was just 2 steps away, and then we fought. I almost caught him, but I didn't expect that a deaf old woman suddenly opened the window and poured a basin of water to wash her feet. It just happened to pour on my body, and that person ran away." Ningshu didn't know whether to laugh or cry about his good luck. She wanted to reach out and pat him on the shoulder, but she took it back halfway. You've worked hard. What happened to your face?" Mo's face was bitter. He could only sigh about why he was always the one who was injured. "I was bitten by mosquitoes on the tree just now. The mosquitoes here are too fierce. It's as if they had been hungry for a year and a half. They caught me and ate me until I was full. I couldn't even hide. It's a pity that my skin is so soft and tender." He twisted his clothes and said, "By the way, before that person ran away, I took a tapestry from him. Here, look." Ning Shu took it in her hand and carefully identified it. She frowned and said, "It's from the palace." Tan Siwei took the tapestry and also confirmed, "It's the weaving method of the Imperial Household Department. It should be tied to the token. This person may be an eunuch or an imperial guard in the palace." Ning Shu took a deep breath. The weather was too hot. Her breath blended into the air and disappeared without a trace. It was like the invisible haze that shrouded the entire capital. "Excuse me, please excuse me." Xinglong Wharf was the noisiest and most chaotic place in the eastern part of the city. All kinds of captains controlled everything here. Ship after ship transported the capital to all corners of the country, and then unloaded ship after ship from all over the country into the capital. They did not stop even after the sun had set. The stewards had lights in their hands, and their hands on their waists. Under the urging of the stewards, hundreds of bare-chested strong men bent their backs and carried large bags one after another, shuttling back and forth between the deck and the shore. They were so busy that no one could see their figures clearly. "Excuse me, have you seen 3 children this tall at the docks?" "No, thank you." "Sir, do you have children called Zimo and Chinchin here?" All right. Sorry to disturb you." The few of them ran around the dock, but found nothing. Ning Shu wiped the sweat on her forehead and said, "This is not the way. There are too many people at the dock. It's dark and no one knows each other. It's a waste of time." "Sigh, you're lucky that there are still people who care about you. I just walked 2 steps and was avoided by others. I didn't even have time to ask." The water that Mo used to wash his feet was already smelly, and it was steamed by the hot sweat on his body. The smell was so sour that he was despised by everyone. His whole face was wrinkled like a rag. Compared with him, Tan Siwei was much better. His bamboo pattern robe was also wrinkled in the crowd, but at least he still had the temperament to support himself. He looked at Mo sympathetically and said, "Directly revealing the identity of the government will not only alert the enemy, but also may expand the public opinion. We have to think of a way quickly." Ningshu lowered her head and thought for a while. She smiled and said, "Problems that can be solved with money are not problems." Mo blinked. "What do you mean?" Ningshu raised her head and looked at him with a smile. "Your mansion should not be short of money, right?" "Mo, is it too late for me to leave now?" "Soon." Mo picked up a lantern and flew up to the small building next to him. He stood on the railing and sprinkled hundreds of copper coins into the sky. Look, 100 taels of silver to find a pet. My master has a snow-white Pekingese as his pet. When he was passing by here, he accidentally lost his pet. My master is very anxious. Everyone, old and young, come and have a look. As long as you can provide clues about this pet, I will give you 10 taels of silver for 1, 20 taels of silver for 2, or 100 taels of silver for 2. Even if you don't have any clues, if you come to join in the fun and spread the news, you can also get 10 copper coins for free. Don't miss this opportunity. For ordinary workers, they can only earn a dozen copper coins by carrying bags for a day. 100 taels of silver was something that they could never dream of in their lifetime. His shout immediately attracted hundreds of people to stop and squeeze over to grab the copper coins. It was very lively. Come, come, come. Everyone, calm down. Speak one by one. Seeing that Huimo was busy dealing with these workers, Ningshu winked at him from a distance and manually praised him. Although this trick was simple, since those children came here to find a way to make money, as long as they heard that they could get copper coins for free, they will definitely rush over without hesitation. It will greatly shorten the time to find the pet. Huimo's eyes were sharp. Standing at a high place, he saw a few children hurriedly walking up the deck and running towards them. He hurriedly winked at Ningshu, who was downstairs. They're coming. They seem to be the ones over there. Ningshu turned her head and immediately squeezed out of the crowd to greet the children. But at the next moment, something unexpected happened. Chapter 576. Hundreds of cargo workers on the shore heard the news and rushed over to grab the copper coins. Huimo was surrounded so tightly that almost no one noticed the three children running out of the big black ship. In the misty night, they were like three small stones, stumbling into the human world. Imo, Shin, run faster. If we are late, the copper coins will be taken away. Yes. We have to grab more later. That way, one will be able to use the medicine. Be careful, the deck is a bit slippery. Xiaoyuan and Imo ran in front, and the thinner Shin followed closely behind. The two teenagers jumped off the ship and reached out to Shin. They supported each other and ran towards Ningshu. As they got closer and closer, Ningshu could not help but feel excited. But when the children were only 100 steps away from Ningshu, the tall pile of sacks suddenly fell towards them. A fire rose from the ground and surrounded them from all directions. There was nowhere to run. Screams pierced through the night sky. Ningshu trembled. She screamed and ran towards the children. Quick, put out the fire! Put out the fire! But the weak voice was easily drowned out by the noise of people fighting for the copper coins. When the fire became bigger and bigger, the burning smoke choked them. The painful cries in the fire finally woke people up. In the middle of the fire, the three short figures were like small animals that had nowhere to go. They were running in all directions in the raging fire, but they were doomed to die. In a moment of silence, there was a sudden panic. Fire! There was a fire! Where is the bucket? Quick! Go get it! Ningshu did not care about anything else. She rushed towards the fire circle, but Tan Siwei pulled her behind him. Tan Siwei was unprecedentedly strong. The fire is too big. If you rush in, you will die. I will go. He picked up a half-filled bucket of water from the shore and poured it over his head. Then, he covered his mouth and nose and rushed into the fire without a care for his own safety. Just as he stepped in, more and more sacks fell down. Like boiling oil into fire, they rose into the sky, wanting to burn everything clean. The hot water vapor in the air condensed into thousands of ice knives in an instant, piercing her limbs and bones, making her unable to move. Ningshu gasped. Xiaoqing! Huimo had already rushed over and shouted, "Help put out the fire! 10 copper coins for a bucket of water! Quick!" The whole shore was in a mess. Hundreds of people were in a hurry. After half an hour, the fire was completely put out. The black muddy water mixed with the pungent smell flowed half of the dock. Ningshu's entire body trembled as she rushed over, desperately searching and shouting in the scorched mess. Only then did she find Tan Siwei buried under a pile of broken sacks filled with sand and stones in the corner. Apparently, during the fire just now, these sacks just happened to fall on his body, knocking him out and causing some flesh wounds. But at least his life was saved. Ningshu closed her eyes and turned her head with a hoarse voice. Where are the children? We are looking for them. Yang Chengwei rushed over and sent the unconscious Tan Siwei to the medical center for treatment. But the rest of the people searched the whole ruins and could not find any trace of the children. Logically speaking, even if the children were unfortunately burned to death and their flesh was burned, there should at least be a few charred bones left. But strangely, there was nothing. These children were like a puff of smoke, silent and formless, dispersing into the air along with the billowing black smoke, mysteriously and bizarrely disappearing. Chapter 577. The officers who rushed to the scene searched the entire crime scene 3 times, but only found a few strangely shaped, half-burnt pieces of wood among the piles of sand and stones. As for the child, he had vanished into thin air. How could this be? Is there something wrong with our eyes? Or are we hallucinating together? I clearly saw the children hiding in the fire and crying for help. How could they suddenly disappear? Huiyamo was exhausted and sat down on the ground. He was puzzled. Could it be that the 2 children ran away? But it was such a big fire. Even if an adult encountered such a dangerous thing, it would be difficult to escape. How could the children escape? If they ran away, where could they go? Could it be that they had wings and flew away from the sky? This was too ridiculous. It wasn't like this was some kind of supernatural novel. Ningshu also had a big headache. Her body was burned. Looking at the black water on the ground and the oil and powder floating in the black water, she sighed and bent down to pick up a small piece of the black water. She sniffed and her eyes flashed. With chips and tongue oil? She raised her head. I know how the fire started. The oil floating in the black water is tongue oil. Because it is black, it is very difficult to detect at night. The murderer scattered a circle here in advance. As long as the target stepped into the circle, he would immediately ignite the fire and form a circle of fire. Originally, these fallen sand and stones would not be able to catch fire, but the bad thing is that they are mixed with a large amount of wood shavings, making them light and swollen. Once they come into contact with the sparks from the burning tongue oil, they will spread into a vast sea of fire in the shortest amount of time, and no one will be able to escape. Huiyamo was stunned. But how could the murderer predict that the children would run here in advance? We thought of the idea of using the copper coins temporarily. Only the 3 of us know it. Could it be that one of us? No, it's impossible. Ningshu bit her lower lip hard and didn't say anything for a long time. Huiyamo and Tan Siwei, one was Xiahou Qing's most trusted person. He helped her many times. Tan Siwei just risked his life for her. She didn't want to doubt either of them. However, she couldn't answer what was going on. After a short silence, the officers ran over with a piece of black thing and covered their noses. 2 imperial envoys. We found this thing on the shore. Huiyamo frowned as soon as he got close. Why is it so smelly? It smells like burnt meat. He took a deep breath and took 3 steps back. Could it have fallen from those kids? Everyone's face suddenly changed. Their facial features twitched. They couldn't bear to get close to the black thing. The officer who grabbed the meat began to tremble. He didn't know whether to hold it or throw it away. However, Ningshu was not afraid at all. She walked forward and took the burnt meat in her hand. She even put it on the tip of her nose and sniffed it a few times. She said with certainty, "It's not human flesh. When I learned to investigate a case with my master, I dealt with a burnt corpse case. Although the burnt human flesh is very similar to this one, there are slight differences. Because when a living person is burned, the flesh is burned from wet to dry. The process is cooked first and then burnt. It takes at least 2 hours to completely burn into coke. Obviously, the time just now was not enough. But this piece of meat has been burned from the inside to the outside. Obviously, it doesn't match. Besides, the smell is mixed with a faint smell of grass and wood ash. So, it's better to say that it's not human flesh, but animal skin that has been tanned. But why did this piece of skin appear in the fire? What role did it play in this strange disappearance in the fire? While she was wondering, 2 officers came over with a short and thin old man. The owner of this batch of sacks has been found. It's him. Chapter 578. The old man looked like he was close to 60 years old. Half of his hair was white. When he saw Ningshu, he began to cry out, "Oh my God, please do me a favor." This fire really wasn't set by this old man. Those children also have nothing to do with me. Ningshu really didn't have time to listen to his words. She reached out to interrupt him and politely asked, "Old man, did you pile up these sacks here?" The old man's face was sad. Yes, it's like this. This old man originally worked as a bricklayer. I had 2 or 3 apprentices in my hands. I worked in various households in the capital to make a living. Later on, this old man discovered that there are many people in the city who need to repair and expand their residences every year. There is a lot of sand and stone. Although the profit is not much, it is still a profit. Thus, I started this business. This batch of sand and stone was just shipped from Qianzhang's place yesterday. I thought that I would hire a cart to take it away tomorrow morning. Who knew that this would happen? Dear nobles, even if this old man had 100 guts, this old man still wouldn't dare to commit murder and arson. Ningshu stood up and clapped her hands. Since it's yesterday's goods, why didn't you take them away today? Instead, you're hoarding them on the shore? Aren't you afraid that someone will steal your goods? The old man's tears were about to fall. AI. What the hell? Yesterday, when the goods were unloaded, this old man hired a cart driver and made an appointment to take them away today. Who knew that this morning, when the first batch of goods was loaded, the 3 ox carts all broke down. The goods at the docks came and went. It wasn't easy to hire a cart, so I had to leave it here for another day. Thinking about the sand and stone, they were heavy and not very valuable. There were so many valuable things at the docks. Who would be so impulsive as to steal them? Who knows, AI. If this old man had known, even if this old man had to carry them on his shoulders, he would have carried them all away. Ningshu nodded her head to express her understanding. But in the next moment, she suddenly turned her head and coldly said, "Then why did you deliberately mix so many bags of wood shavings in these sand and stone?" The old man was stunned. What wood shavings? This old man doesn't know. My 100 bags were filled with sand and stone. How could there be wood shavings? The weight is also wrong. 100 packs? Do you have any witnesses? Of course. At that time, I hired 5 laborers to help me unload the goods, and all of them can testify for me. If you don't believe me, you can ask them one by one. And after I put these things here, I paid someone to look after it. The old man suddenly remembered to look around. Where's the kid? It must be that kid who didn't take good care of it and let something go wrong. Ningshu's eyes moved. Her pair of clear black and white eyes on such a dirty face seemed especially sharp and quick-witted. How old is the kid? Is it a boy or a girl? What does he look like? He's about the same height as me. He's a boy, about 13 or 14 years old. He doesn't look clean, like a little beggar. Originally, I didn't want to invite him, but that kid fell to his knees and begged me. He said that his little sister was sick and didn't have money to buy medicine. He begged me to take pity on him. Seeing that he was about the same age as my little grandson, I pitied him. My heart softened for a moment. Who knew that he would cause such a big disaster? Hearing this, Ningshu's face suddenly tightened. She hurriedly said, "I know what's going on. The fire was set by those children themselves. They knew that we would definitely come to find them, so they set up this trap in advance. They broke the ox cart, mixed wood shavings in the sand and stone, and sprinkled good tung oil. Their purpose was to make a big scene in front of us, in front of the hundreds of workers at the docks, and put on a dazzling show." She quickly ran to the shore and said, "Did you notice that the area they chose just happened to be at the corner of the docks? No one passed by for a long time, so no one would notice their little tricks. It was precisely because no one passed by, and they were the only ones running in this direction in the dark, that they attracted our attention the moment they appeared. When they ran into the prearranged circle, they immediately pulled the mechanism to let the sacks fall down and ignited the tung oil. When the fire burned, they put on the animal skins that were soaked in water to prevent fire. They ran and cried in the fire circle to continue to attract our attention. When the fire burned bigger and bigger and thick smoke rose everywhere, no one would notice that they had put on the animal skins and jumped into the water from the shore. Quick! Immediately call the best person to step on water. Catch those 3 children from the water." Chapter 579. Money was still very useful. With the sound of money, dozens of bare-chested men jumped off the dock like carps who were good at water. Guillemot looked at his empty purse and thought about the promise that he would be rewarded if he found the children. He felt sorry for himself. It was too miserable. The money he had saved for 10 years was all gone. He also owed a lot of money. If Shitsi didn't reimburse him, he would be a bachelor for the rest of his life. He wiped the tears from the corner of his eyes and said, "How do you explain those pieces of wood?" Ning Shu stood at the dock and tried her best to look down with the light, but the sky was completely dark. The weak light could not illuminate the deep river below. After such a long time, it was very likely that it would be a waste of effort. She rubbed her aching temples and said, "Have you seen puppet shows?" Huiyamo nodded. "Of course." "That's it." In order to escape, the three children made several life-sized wooden puppets out of wood and acted in the fire for them. When we saw the puppets being burned in the fire through the thick smoke and fire, we were extremely worried. No one noticed that they had already quietly left the scene. Maybe the three children were too smart, or maybe the murderer was more cunning than I thought. He fooled all of us. Ning Shu sighed. "I was careless. I knew that the murderer had brainwashed the children and led them to take the initiative to fall into the devil's hands one by one. But I was easily fooled and was disrupted by the sudden fire." Under the illumination of the lights on both sides of the river at night, the river sparkled. Dozens of men who were good at swimming searched the river for hours, but they couldn't find any trace of the children until a witness provided a clue. He said that not long ago, he saw with his own eyes a few children riding a small boat downstream. There was a tall and thin adult man on the boat, wearing black clothes and a bamboo hat. It was too dark to see the man's face clearly. After that, no one caught any trace of them. Huiyamo was so angry that he vomited blood. "Damn it! I almost caught that bastard, but he still ran away. I'm so angry. I'm so angry." However, even if he was really angry, it was useless. He sighed and patted but as he got up from the ground, he couldn't help but say dejectedly, "What should I do next? How are we going to investigate this case?" They had encountered so many major cases before, and every case had a troublesome murderer behind it. However, this was the first time they had encountered someone who could play with people's hearts to such an extent. From the beginning to the end, he was like a puppet master hiding behind the scenes. He didn't need to show his face even once. He turned the victims into puppets under his control one by one. He pulled the strings and led the ropes, controlling the children to fight with them, making them hesitate and unable to do anything. Such intelligence, such scheming, simply made one's hair stand on end. Ning Shu raised her head to look at the night sky. People say that the morning glow does not go out and the sunset glow travels thousands of miles. But the strange thing was, even though such a beautiful sunset glow appeared in the west of the capital in the evening, the bright moon above her head was completely covered by a sudden thick cloud. There was not a trace of light. She twisted her sore neck and forced herself to be alert. So far, 5 cases have been completed. The murderer probably won't commit any more cases. What can we do? Let's investigate slowly. By the way, according to the murderer's pattern, there should be a place near here where he has placed the 5th charm. Maybe we can find the last token there. Let's go and find it. We've been running for a whole day without rest. We've eaten 3 simple meals. It's so late now. Why are we still looking for it? Why don't we go back and sleep first and then— Ning Shu sneered and showed her teeth to him. Sleep? If we can't solve the case, the Empress will punish us. After we die, we have thousands of opportunities to sleep well. I'd rather be a lazy pig in my next life than be a human. Chapter 580. The good news was that before Hui Mo's wish to be reincarnated as a pig in his next life was realized, they found the last black curse and the token in a corner of the dock. Hui Mo picked up the thing and wiped away the black ash on the surface. He was surprised. Oh, a silver ingot? Not only was it a silver ingot, but it was also a piece of burnt silver ingot. The cast seal at the bottom was half melted. Only the words, 10 mouths and success could be vaguely seen. He smacked his lips and said, "This should be 50 taels. I've been working with Shitsi for so long, but I only have 100 taels. Those children are beggars. They don't even have enough food to eat. Where did they get so much money? What does it mean to leave it as a token?" Previously, the children had left behind small things like shoes and headbands, which made the token this time stand out even more. Ning Shu looked at the vague words on the silver ingot and frowned. The east was white, and the cool morning wind whistled in her ears. Countless mottled words flashed in the depths of her memory until a beam of white light suddenly appeared in her mind. She snatched the silver ingot. This is dirty silver. The hole in the middle is obviously smaller than 10, so it's not a hole, but a 5. It's the 15th day of the natural selection. Do you remember it now? What? Guillemot was so shocked that he couldn't close his mouth for a long time. Are you talking about the Hanjiang prefecture that happened 10 years ago? Ning Shu solemnly and slowly nodded. Yes. Guillemot's face was blank for a moment, and then he recovered from the shock. There was no second person in the capital who knew better than Guillemot about the terrible famine that happened 10 years ago in the Hanjiang prefecture. In the 14th year of the natural selection, the Hanjiang prefecture suffered a once-in-a-century flood, causing countless fertile fields to be destroyed. The magistrate of the Hanjiang prefecture led the people to fight the flood. Half a month later, the flood receded, and the people suffered heavy losses. Thousands of people were drowned and starved to death. It was not easy for people to survive the hellish winter. In the spring of the next year, they planted new rice and looked forward to new hope. They didn't expect that a bigger disaster was waiting for them. In the 4th month, when the new rice crops were growing like crazy, Hanjiang prefecture did not have a single drop of rain for 3 months in a row. The water in the wells dried up, the newly planted rice died of drought, and the millions of farmland did not have a single grain of harvest. In order to protect his own merits, the Hanjiang prefectural magistrate concealed the disaster and did not report it. As a result, the people in the prefectural magistrate's manor did not have enough to eat. They had to eat dirt to fill their stomachs, and some even had to trade their children for food. It was like purgatory on earth. Today was the sage's 40th birthday. The city was decorated with colorful lanterns, a scene of prosperity and splendor. The red lanterns were bustling. The imperial household department specially cast 200,000 pieces of new silver to congratulate the emperor's 1,000 years, engraved with the 8 characters Heaven's Choice 15, Great Success Treasure Celebration, and offered sacrifices to the ancestors. All people celebrate together. Who would have thought that on the eve of the emperor's birthday, a group of refugees from the Hanjiang prefecture would rush into the capital, thus revealing the truth about the famine? His Majesty was extremely shocked and immediately sent out 6 units to provide disaster relief. He also sent the 100,000 newly minted official silver to the Hanjiang prefecture to solve the urgent situation. But something even more infuriating happened. The 200,000 snowflake silver had just arrived at the Hanjiang treasury, and before they could even spend a single ingot, it all mysteriously disappeared the next morning. At this point, the people were filled with righteous indignation. Riots broke out everywhere, and the Hanjiang prefecture's magistrate committed suicide to avoid punishment. At the time, the prime minister took the initiative to volunteer. First, he pulled out the Hanjiang prefecture's magistrate's corpse, and then executed the entire family to vent the anger of the people. Then, he quickly recovered half of the silver. Finally, he held up his head and kneeled to the heavens. Only then did the flames of disaster, which could have overturned the entire Great U. It wasn't until 2 years later that the aftershocks of the famine barely calmed down. However, the other half of the silver was never found again. A few years later, the case was gradually forgotten with the passage of time, and no one asked where the 100,000 silver was hidden. But strangely, 10 years later, the tainted silver from that year reappeared in the world, and in such a way that shook the entire city. Guillemot looked at the silver ingot, and for some reason, felt a chill run down his spine. It was as if he had a premonition that the capital would be completely thrown into chaos. Chapter 581. In front of the beef noodle stand, for the first time, Guillemot didn't know what to eat. Ning Shu followed his gaze and saw the owner of the noodle stand. A couple was leaning against each other. One was responsible for rolling the noodles, the other was responsible for boiling the soup. Next to them was a pot of fragrant braised beef tendon. In the summer in the capital, even in the morning, it was still sultry. The male owner was sweating from rolling the noodles. Before he could open his mouth, the female owner took a cloth towel to wipe his sweat. The two looked at each other and smiled. After a while, They wiped their sweat again and smiled at each other again. There was a small stool in the stall. Their 7- or 8-year-old son was sitting on the stool and reading the 3-character classic carefully. But after all, he was still young. He was taken out of the stall by his parents in the morning. After reading a few pages, he fell asleep. His little head was like a chicken pecking rice on the book. It was so cute that it made the diners laugh. Ning Shu's mouth curved. She withdrew her gaze and said to Huiyamo, "Are you thinking of your parents?" Huiyamo smiled and said, "When they died, they were about the same age." No. They had been farming for their whole life. They were tanned and looked older than them. At that time, they were really poor. They rented 3 acres of land from the landlord. They had to work from dawn to dusk every day to feed me. They also saved a little copper coins for me. When I grew up, they sent me to the school to learn how to read. I was really ignorant of the immensity of heaven and earth. I even boasted that when I grew up, I would be the #1 scholar in the capital and become a big official. I would never let them suffer again. As a result, after a year of school, I didn't even know the complete 3-character classic. I was beaten by my father. He almost took me to see a doctor to treat my brain. My mother was soft-hearted. She protected me and said, "I didn't give birth to my son to let him repay me in the future. Whether he is smart or stupid, I only want him to have enough food to eat and be safe and happy for the rest of his life." My father was so angry that he scolded a kind mother for wasting her son. Ha 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 ha. He laughed and lowered his eyes to cover the tears and sighed. It's been 10 years. I almost can't remember what they looked like. I remember when I collected their corpses, their bodies were rotten and smelly, just like the marinated beef in this bowl. Ning Shu let out a long sigh. Just as she was thinking about what to say to comfort him and cheer him up, she suddenly heard the last sentence. The corner of her mouth twitched, and the bowl of beef noodles in her hand suddenly lost its fragrance. Huema's prank is successful. He raises his head and laughs. "Lady Ning, I didn't expect that you would be fooled one day. You can't eat the noodles anymore, right?" "It's all mine." Ning Shu looked at his smug face and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She pushed her bowl of noodles to him and ordered a bowl of vegetarian noodles for herself. She didn't expose his fake smile. Huiyamo swallowed the whole bowl of noodles and said, "But I hate that dog official. If he is still alive in this world, I will burn his bones and scatter his ashes." Ning Shu ate the vegetarian noodles that the lady boss just sent and said, "By the way, do you still remember the name of that magistrate? I won't forget it even if I die. That dog official's surname is Zhao, and his name is Mingjin. He is a real hypocrite, a real beast. When he first came to our Hanjiang prefecture, he pretended to be a living bodhisattva who worked for the country and the people. He deceived all of us. Every family worshipped his everlasting lamp at home. I didn't expect that in the 7th year of his term, he secretly plundered countless people. In the drought that year, many people didn't have to die. But he kept it a secret and sealed the border, which led to the death of a total of 280,000 people. After the disaster money was lost, the villagers couldn't bear it and went to the magistrate to find him. That dog official actually shamelessly said that if the heavens want us to die, he can't do anything about it. He also sent officials to seriously injure many villagers. It wasn't until the higher-ups sent an imperial envoy, and Prime Minister Tan personally brought the imperial sword to denounce him. Only then did that dog official know that his death was near and committed suicide to escape punishment. Ning Shu listened and nodded. After a while, she curiously asked, since he knew that the imperial envoy came to denounce him, paper can't wrap fire. Didn't he escape? At that time, the villagers had already surrounded the magistrate's office. They were ready to rush in and cut him alive. He couldn't escape even if he wanted to. This is called heaven's justice is clear. He deserved it. Chapter 582. Ning Shu thought for a while and said, "Where did you find the missing half of the silver?" Huiyamo picked up the second bowl and exposed the beef as if it was his enemy. It was hidden in the cellar under the bedboard of the dog official's house. In addition to the silver, there were also the account books of the people's wealth that he had plundered over the years. Every book had his signature. We were eating grass and choking on the soil outside, living a life worse than death. He, on the other hand, was lying on the pile of silver every day. At that time, we just pulled out his body and whipped it. It was too easy for him. By the way, after he died, his family wanted to bribe the guards to escape. They were all caught by the prime minister who came in time and beheaded in public. That was really satisfying. There is such an evil person in the world. He deserved to die. After hearing this, Ning-Shu couldn't help but feel disgusted. She saw that the sky was completely bright, and there were more and more people on the street. She ate the noodles faster and said, "Well, let's eat quickly." After eating, we still have to investigate the case. Although she didn't know what the silver meant after 10 years, since it appeared, it meant that the case must be closely related to the drought in Hanjiang Prefecture 10 years ago. According to the eyewitness, the man who took the 3 children didn't look like a young man. He was at least 30 years old. 10 years ago, he was in his 20s or 30s. Let's go to the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court to investigate the old case. Maybe we can find some clues according to the pictures. She only hated that she was in a hurry. One day couldn't be divided into 2 days. In this way, she might be able to solve the case earlier and save her mother from the prison. At the same time, she could dig out all the secrets from 25 years ago and save Xiahou Qing, that bastard. Yes, that bastard. The bastard who had his own ideas and insisted on doing things his own way. By the way, she had to find time to check on Tan Siwei. He had suffered for her. He was hit by so many sandbags and was seriously injured. It was reasonable for her to return the favor. However, it was hard to return the favor. Ning-Shu could not help but have a toothache. TSK, Huiyamo nodded. He picked up the second bowl of noodles and gulped it down. He was sweating a lot. He wiped his mouth and said, "The noodles in this restaurant are really good. Even the imperial kitchen in the palace can't compare with them. When I'm not in a hurry next time, I'll definitely come here and eat 8 or 10 bowls. Let's go." The noodle stall owner chuckled as he raised his head and said, "Our little boss's random craftsmanship can't be compared to the delicacies made by the imperial chefs in the imperial palace. Sir, you flatter me. Boss, you're too humble. The food in the palace is exquisite, but compared to us, it lacks the taste of humans." Even after leaving the noodle stall, Huiyamo still looked back with every step he took. He was reluctant to leave and chatted with the boss, but Ning-Shu couldn't bear it any longer and grabbed his ear. "Ouch, ouch. It hurts. My ear. It's going to fall off. Be gentle." When Huiyamo was screaming exaggeratedly, Ning-Shu's face suddenly changed. She said in a low voice with a serious face, "Shut up and listen." Ning-Shu let go of his hand. The two of them stood in the middle of the Zhuke Street and listened to the people walking in panic. When they saw acquaintances, they gathered in groups of 3 or 5 and hurriedly talked about it. Everyone's face was full of fear. "Have you heard? Another child was hurt. It's already the 5th case. This time, it was 3 little beggars from Xinglong Wharf. They were burned to ashes by a big fire. Hundreds of people witnessed it. That scene was really terrible." "Io, what's going on? If that's the case, I'm afraid that the 4 children who went missing earlier are also dead. What kind of crazy person is targeting children? You don't know about it. The master of the Daxianghua Temple said that there is a big monster in the capital. Now it's targeting the young children. Next, it may target us adults. Then, it will target the old people. As long as you are in the capital, no matter if you are male or female, old or young, human or beast, you will all be sucked dry by the big monster. Do you know the thing that was dug out from the tomb of the late emperor? Many people said that this big monster is the mother of the palace." Don't talk nonsense. Aren't you afraid of losing your head now? Shut up, shut up." The person who was scolded quickly covered his mouth and didn't dare to say a word. The people next to him were all pale and trembling. "Oh my God! Oh my God! Is it too late for us to run away now?" His friend sighed deeply. "Run away? Don't dream. I'm afraid you haven't heard the news. It's just said that the legendary crown prince of the Namping mansion was poisoned by a kind of poison called plum blossom kiss. There is no antidote in the world, and he is waiting for death in the mansion. Moreover, the late emperor died from this poison. Even those nobles on the clouds can't protect themselves, so we lowly commoners will die no matter where we hide. Let's go." Let's go back and reunite with our families. Before we die, let's eat and get ready to go." People lowered their heads and spread out with their hearts in their hands. No one noticed that in the middle of the road, a slender and thin figure suddenly changed color. Her eyes trembled. She bit her lips and didn't say anything. She ran down the Vermilion Bird Avenue. Huimo shouted several times, but didn't get any response. He stomped his feet and held his head frantically. "Crazy, crazy. All of them are crazy. Wait for me." Chapter 583. Go. Huimo hurriedly climbed into the carriage and waved his whip through the hurried crowd. After chasing for 2 streets, he finally caught up with Ning Shu, who was drenched in sweat. "Lady Ning, get on the carriage. The horse runs faster than you." Ning Shu ran for 2 streets in one breath and was exhausted. Seeing Huimo quickly get on the carriage, she sat in the carriage and felt the wind in her ears after the horse accelerated. Her heart, which was out of control for a moment, gradually cooled down and her reason came back little by little. Huimo waved the whip high and turned back. "Lady Ning, don't worry. Shiyin and Juicy are with Shitzi. They won't let anything happen to Shitzi." He frowned and was puzzled. But there are less than 10 people in the world who know that Shitzi was poisoned, and they are all close and trustworthy people. Who leaked this secret? Is it the person who poisoned him? Does she want to do it? Ning Shu closed her eyes and pressed her fingers on the soft couch. She almost broke the embroidered bluegrass pattern. She whispered, "It's not someone else, it's himself." Huimo opened his mouth in disbelief. How is it possible? What does Shitzi want to do? Does he want to die? When the news came out that he was poisoned, the shock it brought was enough to be described as earth-shattering. Not only the ambitious people hiding in the dark in the capital would be restless, but what was more terrible was that the Nanping mansion had been guarding Yunyin for many years. Shitzi had led his troops to kill hundreds of thousands of enemies. There were countless enemies in the Jiuzhou. Many people dreamed of cutting off his head. When the hungry hyenas smelled the blood, how could they not be restless and wait for the opportunity to kill him? Ning Shu took a deep breath. The hot sweat she had just run out of gradually cooled down in the wind, sticking to her skin until it reached her heart. After a long time, she said in a trembling voice, "He wants to use himself as bait." As for why he was so anxious to do this, there was only one reason. She didn't dare to say it. She was afraid that the spirits of the past would hear it and make it true. Huimo's eyes widened. He was so shocked that he couldn't say a word. Let's go back." He whistled and begged the horse to run faster. After a long silence, Ning Shu suddenly said, "Stop the car. Let's turn back and continue our investigation." Huimo was shocked and anxious. "Why? We're almost at the prince's mansion, just 3 streets away. Quickly go back and persuade young Master Shitzi. As long as you persuade him, it will definitely work." "He can't do that." Ning Shu's voice was low and deep, like a white plum blossom blooming in the wind and snow. She held on tightly to the flower receptacle to prevent others from seeing the weakness hidden deep in her heart. She said, "Since he has made a decision, no one can persuade him. If he could be easily changed by others, he wouldn't be Xiaoqing. At the same time, since he had made the decision, he must be confident. Thus, even if he could not persuade him, there was no need for him to do so. Instead of wasting time arguing, why don't we do something more useful?" But Ning Shu shook her head firmly and tasted the blood in her mouth. "No buts. I believe that unless he wants to, he won't let himself die easily. Because he is Xiaoqing." Huimo still had objections, but when he heard her last words, his chest shook silently. "You cry. Oh no, you're right. Who is young Master Shitzi? Those cowards can't touch him. Let's go. Let's solve those cases one by one, and then find the bastard hiding in the ditch who poisoned the people. Let him kneel down and beg for mercy." He raised his sleeve and silently wiped the tears from the corner of his eyes. He pulled the reins and turned the horse around. He shouted "Jia," and went back the way they came back at the fastest speed. He silently prayed 10,000 times that young Master Shitzi must be safe. He must be safe. On the carriage, Ning Shu lifted the curtain of the carriage, and looked at the majestic and familiar mansion. The highest building had curved eaves, and the green glazed tiles reflected a beautiful light under the sunlight. It jumped into her eyes and also illuminated the water on her long eyelashes, her pink nails deeply embedded in the soft flesh of her palms. She said in her heart as if she couldn't feel the pain, "Don't die, Xiahou Qing. Listen to me, you can't die. If you dare to die before I see you again, I will hate you in this life, the next life, and the next life until the end of time." Chapter 584. Shi Ziyi. After finishing off the last assassin, Zhu Si sheathed his sword and immediately rushed back to Xiahou Qing's side to check on his injuries. Since the news of Xiahou Qing being poisoned had been made public yesterday, 3 waves of assassins had attacked in one night. The first 2 waves could only be considered small skirmishes. They didn't even touch the inner sect of the prince's manor and had already been cleaned up. After investigation, they were all spies that the enemy of the northern region had planted in the capital, so there was nothing to worry about. Only the 3rd wave, which suddenly broke out between night and morning, was fierce. They had sent the most elite men of sacrifice. Most of Xiahou Qing's shadow guards had been sent to Ning Shu's side. For a moment, these men of sacrifice had charged into the unknown hall and allowed an arrow to cut through Xiahou Qing's neck. "Shi Ziyi." Zhu Si frowned and called out twice before getting a response from Xiahou Qing. "What? Have the assassins been cleaned up?" Zhu Si looked at his blood-soaked neck and couldn't stop his throat from choking. "Your ear." In the past, even if he was in front of thousands of soldiers and horses, Shi Ziyi wouldn't let a single arrow near him. But when the arrow had been shot, he had clearly hesitated. It wasn't until the arrow had scraped the skin on his neck that he had barely dodged it. He didn't even feel the pain of his bleeding. This meant that not only his hearing, but even his sense of touch was slowly deteriorating. Xiahou Qing reached out and touched the side of his neck. Only when he felt the smooth touch of his fingertips did he know that he was injured. He didn't care and took the white silk handkerchief that Zhu Si handed to him. He casually wiped it and threw it to the side. "No harm. It's just a small injury. Go and bring the medicine that Master Duan left behind before he left." Zhu Si and Shi Yin were both shocked. Zhu Si immediately tried to dissuade him. "Before Mr. Duan left, he specifically told me that although this medicine can forcefully amplify your hearing and touch, the consequence is that every time the poison acts up, the extreme pain you have to endure will be magnified by 10 times or 100 times. Not only that, this medicine itself is another kind of poison. After taking it, it will entangle with the plum blossom kiss. Not only will it not cancel each other out, but it will also accelerate the corrosion of your internal organs. Unless it is absolutely necessary, you must not take it out." Around them was a battlefield that hadn't been cleaned up yet. Pools of blood formed a river, completely destroying the elegance of the unknown hall. Xiahou Qing sat diagonally in front of the small table where Ning Shu used to copy his punishment. Bathing in the pale morning sun, half of his sky-blue unlined clothes had been soaked in blood. He was as beautiful as a fragile porcelain. "You should be able to guess my current situation. I can't hear what you're saying clearly, but I can roughly guess that the medicine will only make me die faster. If I lose my sense of hearing and touch, then even if I'm alive, I'll just be a walking corpse. It won't make any difference whether I'm dead or alive. It is better to live a short life and stay awake. As for the pain, what is there to feel pity for in this rotten body? Bring the medicine." Zhu Si hesitated for a long time with a hoarse throat. Finally, he tremblingly took out the medicine bottle from his most treasured place and knelt on one knee in front of Xiahou Qing. "Air, please drink." Xiahou Qing raised his head and drank the tea. After sitting quietly for a moment, he let out a long breath. A bit of color visibly returned to his face. It was as if he had forcibly pulled half his body out of the gates of hell and regained a lot of life. However, only those close to him knew how this pitiful bit of life had been exchanged for by overdrafting his own life. The numbing pain was finally recovered. Xiahou Qing shook his head and smiled. "Hiss, this arrow is indeed a little deep. Zhu Si, help me bandage the wound. Where did this group of assassins come from?" Shi Yan dealt with the assassins' corpses and came in. I just took off the assassins' masks. Most of them were men of sacrifice with scratches on their faces. I can't tell their true identities, but I know one of them. It is Qi Rue, the second butler of the fourth prince's mansion. Chapter 585. Imperial Palace, Wanyun Pavilion. After a night of patrolling, Xiao Yuni took off his scarlet cloak and asked, "How's the situation?" Fei Luan, who was wearing a mask, bent her knees and took the cloak with both hands. She reported in a low voice, "As you expected, the fourth prince did take action. Just 2 hours ago, his second butler led a group of men of sacrifice to attack the Duke of Namping's estate. The butler shot Xiahou Qing with an arrow, but it was not serious and only a flesh wound. The men of sacrifice were all killed. The Duke of Namping recognized Qi Rue and should be targeting the fourth prince's estate now." Xiao Yuni was dressed in silver armor that was spotless. His chiseled face was like the armor on his body. In the capital, which was like a steamer, he was cold-blooded and heartless, without a trace of warmth. Since he killed the deposed concubine Jiang without blinking and cut off her head and hung it at the Meridian Gate as a warning, the sixth prince, Xiao Yuni, became a demon-like existence in the eyes of all the palace servants. They could not help trembling when they saw him. He laughed coldly and walked to the window. This was one of the highest pavilions in the imperial palace. Since the emperor was seriously ill and he took over the power of Chao Ho to guard the imperial palace, he chose this place as his bedroom. As long as he stood in front of this window and looked down, the entire imperial palace seemed to be under his feet, and he did not need to bend his knees to anyone. He curled his lips and looked around coldly. "I did not expect Xiao Yunsu and Xiahou Qing to be able to injure each other, but I did not expect them to be defeated so easily. He is indeed a complete idiot. The fourth prince is indeed extremely stupid. He sent assassins, but they did not kill anyone. Instead, they were caught. Such a mediocre person actually wants to fight for the throne with you. It's ridiculous." Fei Luan obediently poured hot water and took a hot towel to Xiao Yuni's hand. She said according to his wishes, but no matter what, he at least brought some trouble to the Duke of Nanping's estate. "When the snipe and the clam fight, one must die. For your highness, it saves you the trouble of taking action. Let's just watch from the sidelines." "But I'm very curious." The fourth prince and Xiahou Qing did not have any deep hatred before. The biggest conflict was when they sent off the southern Yin envoy and argued at the state banquet. Why would he take such a risk? Xiao Yuni glanced at her and said calmly, "It's nothing. I just told him a secret through some method, a secret that made him desperate and kill me. Do you want to know what the secret is?" Fei Luan looked up curiously, but suddenly, she met with Xiao Yuni's dark brown eyes. Those eyes were locked on her like a sword, as if he was going to stab her into the wall behind her any time. He bowed slightly and looked down. "You want to steal this secret from my mouth and then tell it to Yin Jiaoyi, who I should call mother, right?" Fei Luan's face turned pale as if she had been dismembered by 1,000 cuts. She subconsciously wanted to deny it and explain that she had only asked out of curiosity. It had nothing to do with anyone else, and that she would only ever be loyal to him. But under his frightening gaze, any explanation she had would be useless at this moment. The flood dragon raised his claws, ready to crush the trembling little beast under his claws. He grabbed her chin and took off the mask on her face. Looking at her familiar face, there was admiration, disdain, infatuation, and disdain in his eyes. "Do you think your clumsy cover can really hide it from me? With such a similar face and a carefully arranged encounter, do you think you can make me completely let down my guard against you? Before you swore to be loyal to me with your life, I had already investigated your background." Chapter 586. Kicking Fei Luan to the wall, Xiao Yuni sneered coldly, "My weak and low-key biological mother, who doesn't even dare to breathe loudly, really put in a lot of effort. She's even willing to use her own son as a tool to climb up the social ladder." Fei Luan was so frightened that her face turned pale. She didn't bother to wipe the blood from the corner of her mouth and crawled up like a dog to kneel by his feet, trembling. Xiao Yuni stepped back and sat on the armchair by the window. He picked up a pot of wine and drank it in one gulp. When I was young, I only thought that she was a timid mother. She didn't have a prominent background, didn't have the support of her maternal family, and didn't have father's love, so it was inevitable that she was in dire straits in the palace and could only bow her head to everyone. Every time she saw her say something wrong, or break a cup, or even just a displeased look, she would tremble and kneel down in front of the concubines of a higher rank than her, or even the beauties of the Jiaoyi palace of the same rank. As for me, I stood behind her and looked at her humble figure with anger and pity. As for me, an unfavored prince who grew up in her lap, I received criticism from all directions as if it was only natural that I would be framed. It was even common for imperial brother and the others to vent their anger on me when they were unhappy, and all she could do was to use a handkerchief to wipe her tears over and over again, bending down to beg for mercy in front of her mother. Later on, it happened so many times that she didn't even dare to cry anymore. She could only hide in her bedroom silently and cover her ears and eyes. I thought that she was just a woman with a weak personality. Just like all the living beings in the world, there are those who are strong and those who are weak. There are those who are ferocious like tigresses, protecting their children firmly in their bellies. No matter who comes, they will risk their lives to protect them. There are also those like her, who can't even protect herself and is always wronged. So how can she protect me? I was angry at her for not fighting for herself and hated myself for being born in her womb, but later on, I let it go. It's not that she didn't want to protect me, but she didn't have the ability. Then, when I grow up, when I have the ability to hold up the world for her. Xiao Yuni swallowed the last mouthful of wine, a cold smile appearing on his lips. A few years later, I found out that it was just a joke. The wine pot fell to the ground and turned into powder. He lifted her chin with his toes and narrowed his red eyes. Tell me, why did she send you here? If you dare to lie, I can spare your face, but that doesn't mean I will spare your life. After listening to his monologue, Fail Wan's entire body was immersed in a huge tremor. She spent several months thinking that she had grasped this side of him, but she didn't expect that it was all an illusion. The self-righteous snake catcher finally stepped into the snake's trap. This servant was indeed chosen by Zhao Nyang to be by your side, but this servant's devotion to your highness can be witnessed by the sun and moon. From the moment this servant saw your highness, there was no room for a second man in my eyes. Fei Luan raised her head, her eyes brimming with hot tears falling down like pearls on her face, delicate and pitiful. And when Zhao Yang sent this servant, she never had any intention of harming your highness. Ever since she started her plan many years ago, her goal was to help your highness ascend to the throne. This has never changed. As for why she chose this servant, it's because your favoritism towards Lady Ning is too much, and it will harm you. Therefore, for your sake, Zhao Yang could only choose this servant, hoping that this servant would be able to share a little bit of affection from her and let you calm down. She sent this servant to inquire about the news only so that you and your son can be a little closer. Chapter 587. Before Fei Wan could finish, her throat was almost broken by Xiao Yuni's kick. For me, Xiao Yuni was extremely sarcastic. What a dignified reason. She has said all the good and bad things in the world. Does she still think that I'm that stupid boy who was blinded by her and manipulated by her without knowing anything? She only wants power, prestige, the worship of the entire palace, and the respect of the people. She can't get it with her own ability, so she manipulated me to fight for the position of Empress for her. In order to realize her ambition, she played me in the palm of her hand for 20 years. Now she still wants to play the emotional card with me and whitewash the relationship between mother and son? Ridiculous. He grabbed her neck and said in a low voice, "Go back and tell her two things. First, I want to know what secrets Shu and the Duke family have and why she is targeting Shu. Secondly, I don't care what she wants, as long as it doesn't get in my way." Seeing that half of her blood flows in my veins, I can reluctantly turn a blind eye to those things. But there are two things that I will never allow her to touch. The first is my throne, and the second is Ning Shu. If she dares to touch these two, in the past 10 years, it's equivalent to me not having a mother, then in the future, I can also completely not have one. The feeling of suffocation made Fei Wan's vision turn black. Just when she thought that her life was going to end here today, the grip on her neck finally loosened. She lay on the ground like mud, her teeth chattering uncontrollably as she crawled out of the majestic bedroom step by step. Yes, this servant will. Tell the truth to Her Highness Jowie. This servant will leave. This servant will leave. When the open door was closed again, this place, one of the highest pavilions in the palace, became quiet again. So quiet that only Xiao Yunyi's heavy breathing could be heard. The wind from above blew on his body, bringing with it the unique heat of summer, but it did not warm his heart. He stood up again and walked back to the window, looking down at the palace ridges that were connected together, golden and green. In this world, what else can belong to me? His dark brown eyes were as deep as a lake under the reflection of the glazed tiles. Since there isn't, then I want the throne and you. In that case, I can only kill Xiaoqing. Ning Shu woke up with a start from a headache. He found that the carriage had stopped outside the imperial mausoleum. The files she borrowed from the Ministry of Justice fell to the ground at her feet. They detailed the case of the Hanjiang magistrate's corruption and the starvation of tens of thousands of people 10 years ago. She took these files out of the Ministry of Justice and rushed to the imperial mausoleum without stopping. After reading half of it, she finally couldn't take it anymore and fainted. In her dream, she dreamed that Xiaoqing was ambushed and killed by an assassin. Before he died, he seemed to be smiling as he called out her name. When she woke up, her entire body was soaked in sweat. Her eyes slowly regained focus. She quickly pinched herself and repeatedly told herself that it was just a nightmare. Dreams and reality were often the opposite. What she was afraid of would never happen, definitely not. It takes her a short time to convince herself. She opens the bamboo curtain and finds that Huimo is also resting on the wooden board with his hands on his chest. Everyone was exhausted from running for their lives, but no one could do anything about it. After all, they were all fighting for their lives with the King of Hell. Ningshu wanted to let him rest for a while, and she could go in and ask him herself. She didn't expect that as soon as she moved, Huimo would wake up. "You're awake. We're here." The Imperial Mausoleum is the place where the Demon Empress Monument was found. Let's go in. Chapter 588. Ningshu said apologetically, "You can sleep for a while more. There are so many guards here. I'll be fine. I'll come out after asking a few questions." Huimo rubbed his eyes and patted his chest. "Let a weak woman like you investigate the case alone? Young Miss Ning, you're looking down on me too much. When we fought with Shitzi, we didn't sleep for 3 days and 3 nights in order to prevent the enemy's sneak attack. We still beat the hell out of the warhounds. How long has it been? My stamina is very strong." Ning Shu was about to be moved to tears, but she couldn't stop her mouth from twitching. Who taught you to say that?" Huimo blinked his big innocent eyes, Shiyin. "He told me that if I say these words in front of the girls, they will definitely look at me with admiration." Ning Shu patted his shoulder sympathetically and sincerely suggested, "Well, it's different. The girls will be happy to give you a pair with their fists. Silly boy, some brothers don't need. Well, if you're not sleepy, come in with me. Take the token." Huimo followed behind in confusion and asked, "What do you mean? Did I say something wrong? Tell me clearly. I really don't understand." Because of the sudden appearance of the Demon Empress Stone Tablet and the Blood Lotus Book, the mausoleum was heavily guarded. They couldn't enter even if they took out the token of the Namping Mansion. Until someone came with Empress Chao's order, they were let in. And this timely help was none other than Xiao Yunyi, whom she hadn't seen for a long time. "Greetings, Your Highness." Xiao Yunyi waved his hand at the guards expressionlessly and ordered them to leave. When he turned back to look at Ning Shu, his eyes were full of warmth, just like when he was young. He didn't say anything, but his eyes were shining. He lowered his head, his eyes filled with a longing that had been suppressed to the extreme. "Shu'er, long time no see." Ning Shu thought that they had already made things clear, both sides shaking hands and making peace, But in the face of such a sincere gaze, she couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Fortunately, she still had to hide the fact that she had recovered her memory, so she pretended to be at a loss and blinked her eyes, respectfully bowing her head and saying, "Does this subject know Your Highness?" "Please forgive me, Your Highness. This subject's daughter contracted a serious illness a few days ago and has yet to remember many things. However, I still have to thank Your Highness for taking the trouble to bring me a handwritten order and helping me investigate the case." The mist in Xiao Yunyi's eyes fluttered as he kept away those heavy and suppressed emotions. When he smiled again, he was back to normal. "That's right, you're sick. There have been many things happening in the palace recently and I forgot about it. How has your body recovered? It's been hard on you to let you work on the case as soon as you returned to the capital." Ning Shu thought that he would leave after sending the handwritten order, but she didn't expect him to lift his robe and enter the mausoleum with her. She immediately felt a headache and could only continue to walk forward. "Thank you for Your Highness' understanding. It's my duty to be able to work for the Empress. This subject's daughter is flattered by Your Highness' kindness." This unfamiliar tone made Xiao Yunyi laugh. "You wouldn't talk to me like this in the past. I remember that the last time I didn't see you for so long was when I was 18 years old and took father's task to Hailong province for the first time. Because the task was urgent, he immediately urged me to get on the horse after leaving the court and didn't even have time to tell you in advance. I was afraid that you would be angry with me, so I slept at most 4 hours a day on the day of the task. I wanted to finish the task as soon as possible and return to the capital to apologize to you, but I didn't expect that it was still too late when I rushed back. You were so angry that you kicked me as soon as we met, and then didn't give me a good face for half a month. You were completely unlike now, respectful, polite, and distant like there was a thick layer of paper between us. It seems like you've really forgotten about me completely." Chapter 589. Those past memories that were as bright as the morning sun had only been with him for 2 to 3 years. Every night when he was tossing and turning, he would sleep on them like he was drinking poison to quench his thirst. But to her, it had been 300 years. Even if she bent down by the lake to reach for the flower at the bottom of the lake, it was just a distant shadow and could no longer stir up the waves in her heart. Ning Shu pursed her lips silently and said meaningfully, "Something like that actually happened. I was too presumptuous. At that time, I was still too young. So I was mischievous when I did things. Your Highness, please don't be calculative with me. Now that we've both grown up, many things have changed. Just like how Your Highness must have gone through many hardships to become so calm and mature like a dragon now." Xiao Yunyi looked up at the dazzling sun at the top of the sky, his expression full of self-mockery. "Yes, everything has changed. You've changed, I've changed too. The only thing that doesn't change in this world is that whether you want to or not, you're constantly changing, becoming another version of yourself. You're so unfamiliar that you're unrecognizable." They were no longer as close as they used to be. Ning Shu could not respond to such a topic. She could only quietly lower her head and walk with him in silence. Xiao Yunyi suddenly stopped and said, "Speaking of which, you promised to treat me to a meal before, but you forgot. I've really suffered a big loss." Ning Shu stopped and was so embarrassed that she did not know how to respond. Looking at her hesitant expression, Xiao Yunyi laughed happily for the first time in many days. "Don't worry, I won't eat you up. We've known each other for 12 years, and this is the first time I'm investigating a case with you. I have to experience it." She did not know if she was too sensitive or something else, but she felt that the current Xiao Yunyi was a completely different person compared to before. It was as if it was only yesterday that the young prince who came to her door to denounce her for wearing 3 sets of wedding clothes had suddenly changed. This person had already changed without her noticing. His speech and actions were as deep as the sea, and he was able to control his emotions and emotions freely. Those dark brown eyes were clearly smiling, but when she looked into them, she felt very oppressed. He was even scarier than he was in his first life. Why? What had happened in this life that caused him to become like this? Ning Shu secretly clenched her fists and tried to restrain the fear in her heart. She still pretended to be oblivious to the fact that she had lost her memory. She smiled warmly and said, Since your highness has given the order, I dare not disobey it. The construction of the imperial mausoleum started when the late emperor ascended the throne and was still incomplete when he died. It took 35 years. The scale of the project, the grandeur of the project, and the amount of money spent in the national treasury was enough to leave a thick stroke in the history books of Great Yu. It had to be said that the previous emperor's love for her had reached the pinnacle. The entire imperial mausoleum covered an area of more than 100 hectares. 13 days ago, it suddenly collapsed, and the Calamity Monument appeared in the northwest corner of the imperial mausoleum. Yesterday, she spent the whole day chasing after those children. Except for the old silver ingot and the black curse that implied the kiss of plum blossoms, she found nothing. She could only put her hope in the place where she found the stone tablet, which was also the source of the case. After that incident, the ominous monument with the words Calamity Demon Empress written on it was quickly transported into the imperial palace. It was strictly guarded and could not be seen. Only the collapsed area was left to be investigated, so no one dared to touch it. Under the guidance of the mausoleum guards, Ningxu and the others quickly found their destination. That stone tablet was found here. The guard in charge of patrolling that day was also pulled over. He honestly narrated the details, not even daring to raise his head. Because of this sudden incident, he was so scared that he could not eat or sleep peacefully for 10 days. His little face was deathly pale. According to the usual practice, in order to prevent daring thieves from disturbing the previous emperor's peace, the imperial mausoleum was divided into 3 rounds every day: morning, noon, and night. The entire imperial mausoleum was divided into 16 sections, with 4 people in charge of each section. On the day of the incident, it was indeed a servant's job. This servant clearly remembers that during that period of time, it was raining heavily every day. It was so heavy that the entire capital seemed to be soaked in water. However, as the imperial mausoleum's guards, this servant remembered their duties and did not dare to slack off in the slightest. Only after earnestly completing the morning patrol did this servant dare to hide in the corridor to avoid the rain. Because our bodies were soaked, the brothers were not happy. We agreed to change into dry clothes together, but because I was in a hurry to relieve myself, I went to the latrine alone with an umbrella. Before I entered the latrine, I suddenly heard a loud rumble from the northwest corner, as if something had collapsed. This servant was shocked and ran into the rain without holding the umbrella. This was the scene I saw. This servant knew that the collapse of the imperial mausoleum was a great omen. If the rainwater leaked into the underground palace and damaged the previous emperor's dragon body, even if this servant had 10,000 heads, we would not be able to shoulder the responsibility. As a result, this servant hurriedly called for people to repair it. However, just as a few bricks were picked up, a corner of a monolith appeared in the sand. This servant was curious and went forward to take a look. Who knew that after the sand and stones were cleaned up, they would see those 4 words: "I beg your highness to spare my life." Although this thing was discovered by this servant, but even if this servant had 10 dog lives, this servant would not dare to tamper with this matter. Chapter 590. The young guard was only in his teens. He was crying as he spoke, and he looked pitiful with snot bubbles coming out of his nose. In addition, this child had a young and tender face, with soft and tender skin, which made Ningxu look disgusting, as if she had bullied him. Ningxu hurriedly said, "Don't cry, don't cry. No one said that you did it. Answer me a few questions first. You said that you just finished patrolling in the morning. Then did you find any signs of the bricks loosening?" The young guard sniffled and said uncertainly, No. The rain was too heavy that day, and I couldn't see the road clearly. When we patrolled, we were mainly looking for thieves who dared to sneak in. We really didn't notice that the bricks were loose." Then a few days before the accident, did you find any thieves or other suspicious people wandering around? The young guard shook his head timidly. "No." Ningxu frowned and thought to herself, "That's strange. Before I came here, I went to the Ministry of Works to borrow the books about the Emperor's mausoleum. It recorded that when the mausoleum was built, It took a total of 80,000 workers in 35 years. The left and right assistant ministers of the Ministry of Works supervised the construction personally. They selected the best craftsmen in the country and used the best bricks and wood. Now it has only been 20 years since the completion of the mausoleum. How could it collapse like this after a few rainstorms? Brother Huimo, please go and take a look at the exposed layer of soil where the stone tablet was dug out. Is it new or old? Is there any trace of it being dug out? Huimo's eyes lit up and he rubbed his palms. Great. Digging up dirt and digging up corpses is my specialty. I just learned a new way to determine the age of the buried corpse from a book. Hee, it's a good opportunity to try it. Ningshu also stood aside and observed the traces of the collapsed bricks. Xiao Yuni went forward in confusion. Do you think it's man-made? Ningshu didn't even think about it. Her clear eyes stared at the broken parts of the bricks, and she knocked them one by one. Of course, if there are ghosts in this world, then the late emperor could have reprimanded the person who brought disaster to the country. Why would he use such a roundabout and troublesome trick? If the late emperor really had the eye of the heavens and could sense what would happen after his death and make a prophecy 25 years in advance, then the current chaos in the palace wouldn't have happened. But to transport such a large stone tablet into the imperial mausoleum without anyone noticing, dig 3 feet into the ground and bury it, and then make it collapse and expose at the right time. Not only do we have to avoid hundreds of pairs of eyes inside and outside the mausoleum, we also have to talk about many traps and mechanisms. If we accidentally touch it, we will be pierced by thousands of arrows. I really don't believe that anyone in 9 regions has such an ability. Xiao Yuni furrowed his straight eyebrows, a small knot forming between his eyebrows. He was handsome to begin with, and now that he was deep in thought, the unfathomable shrewdness he had just now disappeared temporarily, showing a trace of pure kindness. Unfortunately, the person he met was Ningshu, whose heart was as firm as a rock. She didn't even turn her head and said, "There's always a way. It's just that we haven't thought of it yet. I don't believe in the so-called supernatural forces and gods. The most terrifying thing in the world is not the dead, but the human heart. At the same time, the most omnipotent thing is often the human heart." She turned over the bricks one by one, but didn't find any traces of gunpowder. She wasn't discouraged and clapped her hands as she stood up and said, "Where was the blood lotus letter and the child's broken finger found? Take me to see it." The eunuch leading the way raised his finger and said, "It's over there. Noble ladies, please follow this servant to see it." It was like this that day. After the imperial mausoleum collapsed, the demon steel appeared. This servant was so frightened that his soul almost left his body. He didn't even dare to touch it and hurriedly reported the news to the palace. His Majesty was furious and immediately sent the 108 monks of the Xianghua Temple to the imperial mausoleum to expel the evil and seal the demon steel. That ceremony was extremely grand. Within 300 steps of the demon steel, magical instruments were placed on every side. The eminent monks used their hands to form seals and set up arrays, chanting the exorcism incantation. The servants all watched from the side, and no one dared to make a sound. That ceremony went from day to night, and then to day again. It went on for an entire day and night. The sky was clear and bright, and the sun was shining brightly. Just as it was about to end, a bright yellow silk appeared in the sky. It was bright red, and it slowly floated towards the execution ground. Seeing this, the abbot of the Xianghua Temple, Great Master Zhu Ming, immediately reached out to grab the silk. After unfolding it, he recognized the blood lotus drawn on it, as well as the 8 treasonous words written in the center of the lotus. This happened right before our eyes. Everyone can testify. Chapter 591. Ningshu repeatedly confirmed, "Are you sure that other than the eminent monk, there are only your people around, and you did not see anyone suspicious?" The eunuch pointed to the sky and swore, "This servant dares to guarantee with my life." Because of what happened to the stone tablet the day before, everyone was scared. Everyone was alert and vigilant, afraid that there would be another accident during the ritual. If that happened, it would be hard for us to absolve ourselves from the blame. But who would have thought? Who would have thought that even though we were tightly guarded, something still went wrong in the end? He knelt on the ground and begged Ning Shu with tears in his eyes. This servant begs the noble one to find out the truth and save our lives. Otherwise, all of us here will die to atone for our sins. Behind him, rows of guards and eunuchs knelt down one after another. Every pair of eyes was filled with despair. Faced with so many eager gazes, Ning Shu's heart surged and her throat tightened. She took a deep breath and helped the eunuch up. Everyone, please rise. I promise you that I will do my best. Eunuch, where was the severed finger found? Was it also here? The eunuch rolled up his sleeves and wiped his tears. He led Ning Shu to an inch-long white circle. It's here. It also suddenly fell from the sky? The eunuch nodded. He still remembered the horror of that day. Yes, just the day before yesterday, the demon monument and the blood lotus inscription happened one after another. We lit up hundreds of lanterns around here and kept watch day and night, afraid that there would be more demons. But what we feared really happened. That morning, more than 10 of us were squatting here, not daring to blink. Suddenly, we heard the sound of something falling from the sky. The sound was not loud, so we thought we heard wrong. In the end, when we looked carefully, we saw something extra on the ground. It was a severed finger. It was only an inch long, bloody, rotten, and smelly. At first glance, we knew it was a child's finger. We thought of the recent cases of children losing their lives in the capital and guessed what had happened. Ning Shu nodded. She had seen the severed finger in the Supreme Judiciary's freezer yesterday. It was indeed an inch long, as thin and soft as a willow branch that had just sprouted in spring. It made people unable to bear to look at it and turn their heads away. Do you still remember the time? 7:00, clock just passed. What about the day of the blood lotus letter? That day, the ceremony was rather loud, so I didn't notice. The eunuch turned his head and asked the others, "Did you notice?" Everyone shook their heads and said that they had watched the eminent monks perform the ritual for an entire day and night. It was a blur, and no one had bothered to ask about the time. Only a young imperial bodyguard raised his hand and said, "I know, it's also 7 in the morning." I stood outside and heard the bell from the bell tower. Not long after the bell rang, I heard everyone shouting that something was floating down from the sky. Hey, that's amazing. This murderer had too many strange habits. Every 3 days, he would commit a crime. Every time he dropped something, he would pick the right time. What was wrong with him? Do you have obsessive-compulsive disorder? Hui Mo came over with a handkerchief and wiped the mud off his hand. Ning Shu looked back at him and asked, "Is there a result?" "Of course. I'm better than 2 people." Hui Mo patted his chest and boasted shamelessly. He bent down and blinked his eyes mysteriously. "Guess what the result is? Has anyone dug the soil? Can you guess? Can you guess? If you can't guess, then I'll be merciful and tell you. That soil is old. There is no trace of moss in it. I tested it with the juice of the purple gold grass. I'm afraid that the soil hasn't seen the sun for nearly 10 years. This means that the stone tablet was not buried recently. Just like the soil, it has been there for many years." Chapter 592. After a short moment of shock, Ning Shu's eyes suddenly lit up. She immediately asked the eunuch, "Eunuch, may I ask if this mausoleum has been repaired since it was built? How many times? What year, month, and day? Where did the craftsmen come from? Do you have a specific list?" A series of questions. The eunuch didn't have the strength to resist at all. He didn't know which one to answer. Ning Shu simply said, "The Imperial Mausoleum's renovation is different from others. There must be a detailed record book. Please show it to me." Oh, there is. There is a record in the Ministry of Works, and we also have one here. This slave will go and get it. Please wait for a moment. This slave will come back quickly." The eunuch hurriedly ran away while holding his robe. He said that he would come back soon. Sure enough, in less than half an hour, he trotted back with a thick book and put it in front of Ning Shu. Ning Shu didn't even think about it. She spread the book on the stone bench next to her and quickly flipped through it. Hui Mo also didn't hesitate and stepped forward to help. Xiao Yuni said, "Do you think that someone set up this trap in advance many years ago to deal with Imperial Mother?" Ning Shu's eyes were as bright as stars. She searched for the bead in the vast sea of words in front of her. "This is the only explanation. As you said, this stone tablet is big and heavy. It is difficult to sneak it in without so many eyes. So there are only three possibilities. First, all the guards inside and outside the Imperial Mausoleum work together to set up all of this. This is obviously unlikely. In addition, Guillermo just testified that this tombstone has been buried for many years. So this guess can be ruled out. Second, the guard who discovered this stone tablet has a problem. At that time, the bricks collapsed and the sand sank deep, revealing a corner of the stone tablet. It's true that the stone tablet was originally buried underground, but don't forget that at that time, only the little guard was present. As long as he wanted to, he could have taken advantage of the fact that there was no one around to carve that rebellious sentence on the empty stone tablet. Then, he could have quickly covered it with sand and mud and called for his companions in a panic. Finally, under their eyes, he could have pretended to accidentally dig out the stone tablet. The little guard knelt on the ground as if he was struck by lightning. He shook his head and swore, almost bursting into tears again. Ning Shu hurriedly comforted her. "Don't be afraid. This is just one of our guesses. Whether or not you did it, we'll know once we check your recent whereabouts. Don't worry, we won't frame a good person, and we won't drag someone else in to take the blame. I haven't mentioned the third possibility yet. Don't faint. Please don't faint." Flower took a few deep breaths and held back her tears under Ning Shu's fearful gaze. Ning Shu exhaled and continued reading. "The third possibility is what I'm doing now. If it's not a thief or a guard of the mausoleum, then there's only one kind of person who can do this, and that's the craftsman of the mausoleum. No one was more proficient in the art of subterfuge than them, and no one was more legitimate and less suspicious than them. Found it. It's here, look. The mausoleum of the late emperor has been renovated twice in the past 2 years. The first time was in the 9th year of Tianzhe, which was the 60th birthday of the late emperor. To show filial piety, His Majesty ordered the craftsmen to strengthen the mausoleum. They built 8 stone statues of mythical beasts to protect the late emperor. The second time was at the end of the 15th year of Tianzhe. Ning Shu raised her head and looked at Huiyamo. Both of their eyes were filled with amazement. Ning Shu continued, "The drought in the Hanjiang prefecture caused the people to lose their homes. His Majesty was in great pain and sorrow. He personally went to Shangwa Temple to chant sutras and pray. He also ordered all the ancestral mausoleums to be renovated in order to bless the great Yu, the people, and the Shao family. Naturally, this mausoleum of the late emperor was included. Because there were many mausoleums to be renovated, the number of craftsmen assigned to each mausoleum was inevitably reduced. There were a total of 239 craftsmen recorded in the book, and they are all listed here." Ning Shu's white fingertips went through the 239 names, as well as the age, place of origin, and family background that were recorded in detail behind the names, one by one, trying to find some suspicious points. However, even though the number of names on this list was only a drop in the ocean compared to the vast number of 80,000 craftsmen who built the mausoleum, it was still difficult to pinpoint the problematic one in such a short period of time. It was as difficult as finding a needle in a haystack. At this time, she couldn't help but envy Xiahou Qing's perverted ability to remember everything he heard. It was a pity that he wasn't by her side now. Not here. The softest part of her heart seemed to have been torn open. When the wind blew, it hurt so much that she couldn't straighten her back. She pinched the web between her thumb and index finger to make herself not think about him for the time being, so that she could maintain the highest level of consciousness. She calmed down and carefully looked through the list in front of her. Huiyamo and Xiao Yuni also came to help. Very quickly, the imperial mausoleum became quiet again, leaving only the sound of pages turning. As Xiao Yuni searched, he continued to ask Ning Shu, "Sure, if it's as you guessed, it's one of these craftsmen, then what I don't understand is, since he had already set it up many years ago, why did he wait until now to make trouble for Mother?" Ning Shu said, "Maybe the time was not right at that time. and the other party knew that he couldn't compete with the Empress, so he didn't make a move and waited for the right time. Or maybe after he set up the stone tablet, he didn't wait for the second step and met with an accident, so he waited for several years. Or maybe he couldn't do it on his own and had already given up, but someone suddenly reached out to help him. All kinds of encounters in the world are always full of opportunities and good fortune. Without the final decryption, no one can detect every detail. As the two were discussing in a low voice on the other side, when he saw one of the names, Huiyamo blinked and suddenly said, "Eh? Why does this name seem a little familiar? Where have I heard it before?" Ningshu looked over and asked, "Which one?" Huiyamo casually pointed at the name of a person called Yuan Wanting and said, "Well, it's this one. TSK. This name is quite elegant. At first glance, he doesn't look like a craftsman, but more like a scholar." Ningshu's pupils constricted, her eyes full of surprise. He might be a scholar. Do you still remember Master Yuan of Aoshuang Academy? What, it's him? Chapter 593. In Aoshuang Academy, under the lush and gloomy locust tree, a dozen or so little students all straightened their backs and sat upright on simple praying mats. They shrunk their necks and didn't dare to make a sound. A skinny little mud monkey stood outside the door and tried to push the door a few times. When he found that the door was locked, he quickly turned around and jumped in through the half-collapsed mud wall. He quickly sat beside a fat boy and gently pushed him. "Did the teacher drink today?" The little fat boy timidly said, "I don't think so. He just went into the room to get a book and a ruler. He said that today he was going to talk about a person called Wu Shishir in the records of the Grand Historian." The little mud monkey dusted off the wall and disdainfully said, "Idiot, that was Wu Zishu. Last time the teacher was drunk under the locust tree, I went over and peeped. Oh no, if he didn't drink, he will check his homework today. I'm finished." The little fat boy opened his eyes wide and said in horror, "Ah, what homework? Why don't I know? I'm finished. I didn't write anything. Woo, I don't want to be hit in the palm. I want to go home." The little fat boy cried and wanted to run away. With a bang, he bumped into someone. The little mud monkey's face was too horrible to look at. All the other children were scared into silence. Yuan Wanting sneered condescendingly. The little fat boy trembled and was so scared that he peed. Yuan Wanting looked at his wet feet and was so angry that he blew his beard and glared. He kicked the little fat boy to the side. The little fat boy was saved. He rubbed his, but that did not hurt, and quickly rolled to the side so that he would not be an eyesore to the teacher. Yuan Wanting threw the ruler on the wooden stool and said in a strange tone, "You didn't do your homework?" The group of little mud monkeys shrank into quails. No one dared to speak. Yuan Wanting lazily sat on the stone bench. "If you didn't do it, then don't do it. Anyway, I don't have time to criticize you. Little brats, perk up your ears and listen to me attentively. Wu Zishu was a member of the Chu dynasty. His father was called Wu Shi, and his brother was called Wu Shang. His name was Wu Ju, and he was famous for his straightforward advice to King Zhuang of Chu. Therefore, he became famous in Chu. Under the locust tree, Yuan Wanting was reciting his scriptures half-dead. The little mud monkeys around him were absent-minded as usual. They winked at each other, secretly wondering why Teacher Yuan was so easy to talk to today. Could it be that the sky was going to rain red and the sun was going to rise in the west? Had the evil teacher changed? Just as the little monkeys were wriggling around and having fun, the broken door was slammed loudly. The dust on the broken wall fell, and there was the sound of swords being unsheathed. The little monkeys jumped in fright and huddled together. "I still haven't finished." On the stone bench, Yuan Wanting threw the unfinished book in his hand to the ground. "Little brats, you can leave now. You don't have to come again. From today onwards, this academy will be closed. Go back and tell your parents to find another one. It's best to find a teacher who is more reliable than me. The road to Jianghu is long, so I will take my leave now." He stood up with a lazy smile and opened the door. Huiyamo stood outside the door with his hand on his sword. He raised his head and said coldly, "Teacher Yuan, please." In the mausoleum of the previous emperor, Ning Shu looked at the vegetable farmer kneeling in front of her. Her eyes were sharp, and she didn't say a word. This person's surname was Li Yu, and he was a famous vegetable merchant in the capital. The Imperial Household Department was responsible for the usage of the guards and eunuchs in the Imperial Mausoleum. Every 15 days, the only food was vegetables, and they couldn't store them. Therefore, Li Yu was specially selected from the famous vegetable merchants in the city. After registering with the Ministry of Revenue, he would send fresh fruits to the Imperial Mausoleum every evening to ensure the daily consumption of the Imperial Mausoleum. Ning Shu spent half a day and searched every corner of the Imperial Mausoleum. She asked all the guards and eunuchs. No one would have thought that in the end, she would find a flaw in this little Li Yu. Chapter 594. You're called Li Yu? Ha! How can such a name be worthy of you? In this king's opinion, you should be called Li Tiandan. How dare you? Xiao Yuni narrowed his eyes and stared coldly at this useless piece of mud by his feet. Faced with the thunderous anger, Li Yu finally stopped being stupid and slapped his own face again and again, leaving purple marks on his face as he wailed, "I beg your highness to forgive me. I beg your highness to forgive me. I beg your highness to forgive me." This commoner knows that I was wrong. It was this commoner who was stupid and was blinded by lard to do such a stupid thing. This commoner left a chance for the thief to take advantage of and create such a big disaster. But this commoner really didn't do it on purpose. This commoner was sick with leprosy and couldn't go out to deliver the goods, so I asked someone else to do it. Who knew? Who knew? This commoner really didn't do it on purpose. It was that bastard Lu Laosan who harmed me. He is the main culprit. Your Highness, quickly go catch him. In this situation, this person was still full of excuses. Ning Shu frowned in disgust. People who have leprosy, if it's mild, will have patches on their skin or skin lesions like papules. If it's serious, the skin will be uneven, accompanied by hair loss, thick lips, a lion-like face, and even deformed limbs. If you really had such a serious disease, how could there be no traces on the back of your hands and neck? You're clearly lying. Li Yu was about to quibble when he was interrupted by Ning Shu. She really didn't have time to listen to his nonsense. Also, if you really were sick and couldn't serve the imperial family, according to the rules of the Ministry of Revenue, you should immediately report to the Ministry of Revenue and change the vegetable vendor, instead of deceiving your superiors and subordinates. You specifically told Lu Laosan to dress up as you, and even lowered your voice when you spoke, saying your usual catchphrase. If I hadn't accidentally heard that Lu Laosan was wearing a bamboo hat when he delivered the food in the evening when it was dark, I would have been fooled by you. I don't think you're stupid. It's clear that your conscience fell into your eyes for money. We don't have time to beat around the bush with you. If you don't tell us the truth, today your head will be left here to be buried with the late emperor. Ning Shu's words hit the ground, making Li Yu's soul almost leave his body. He cried out, "I'll tell you. I'll tell you." This commoner has confessed everything. It turned out that after Li Yu was elected as an imperial merchant 5 years ago, his status as a vegetable merchant in the capital had soared to the sky. When the people heard of his reputation, they all rushed to order food from him. Over time, he naturally became too busy, and the 7 or 8 workers under him were not enough. Hiring new workers would naturally be a waste of money, but he couldn't bear to not earn that large sum of money. Thus, one night, he came up with a plan. It would be better to secretly assign the work at hand to other small vegetable farmers. Every day, they would deliver melons and vegetables for him. This way, he wouldn't have to spend a single tael of silver, and he wouldn't have to waste any effort. Every day, he could just sit at home and drink tea while waiting for them to deliver large sums of money. Beautiful, beautiful. Lu Laosan was one of the vegetable farmers who worked with him. He was in charge of the mausoleum and the other 2 restaurants. After confessing his good deeds, Xiao Yuni wasn't willing to let this kind of trash dirty his eyes. He ordered for them to be sent to prison and sent people to arrest Lu Laosan and his wife. Ning Shu didn't think that those 2 scumbags, Ling Er's adoptive parents in name, would actually have such a large connection with the imperial mausoleum. It was really beyond her imagination. Xiao Yuni said, "From the looks of it, It's very likely that Lu Laosan took the opportunity to sneak into the Imperial Mausoleum the night before to do something to the stone tablet. The next day, after the heavy rain, the bricks collapsed, exposing the stone tablet. But how did he do it with the Blood Lotus inscription and the broken finger? Could it be that he also did something else? Chapter 595. Ning Shu furrowed her eyebrows. But the time he took to deliver the food was very short, and it would be faster for him to do something on the ground. The Blood Lotus note and broken finger both fell from the sky. Did he climb up a tree and place the mechanism there? Then what are the conditions for the mechanism to be triggered? How can he guarantee that it would be triggered at the right time and no one would notice? Xiao Yuni also thought along this line of thought. Could it be something like a crossbow? Then even if he was outside the mausoleum, he would be able to shoot it here. Ning Shu shook her head slowly. It can't be done. Even the nearest wall is 3 to 4 miles away from here, far out of the range of the crossbow. And if the crossbowman wants to aim at the target in such a precise range, he must be standing on high ground. Look around the Imperial Mausoleum. It's flat ground. There's no chance for the crossbowman to move at all. This possibility was completely ruled out. Xiao Yuni fell into deep thought and stopped talking. Ning Shu bit her petal-like lips and stood on the spot silently. She looked up and observed every corner of the mausoleum seriously, trying to find more effective clues from here. The warm light above her head shone on her porcelain-like face. It was transparent and beautiful, but also unusually sharp. Xiao Yuni stood beside her, looking at her side profile almost greedily. He couldn't help but remember when she was young. When she first learned from teacher Hui Ci and came into contact with detective cases, they often wouldn't see each other for half a month. But as long as they met, she would be like a chatterbox, sharing with him the novel things she encountered in detective cases. Even if he couldn't understand her new ideas, she would never get tired of it. Unlike now, it seemed like they hadn't talked for a long time. Even if they were standing side by side at this moment, they were so far apart that it felt like there was a river without a bridge between them. Not knowing what Xiao Yuni was thinking, Ning Shu repeatedly measured the area with her feet without any distractions. The testimonies of the guards and eunuchs just now rolled in her mind like a water curtain. Every step of the crime followed her train of thought and deduced step by step, simulating one world after another and overturning it again and again. There was already a buzzing sound in her head, announcing that she was about to reach her body's limit, but she still forced herself to hold on and kept telling herself, "Don't be weak. You don't have the right to rest. Work harder, work harder." There was no time. However, the alarm bell in her heart still rang heavily in her mind. Dang, dang, reminding her not to push herself too hard. Ning Shu suddenly stopped and looked in the direction of the bell tower, 500 steps away from the Imperial Mausoleum. I think I know how he did it. She endured the buzzing pain in her head and found the little guard who had just spoken to her. You said that when the Blood Lotus letter floated down, you happened to hear the bell of the clock tower. Which tower is it? The young imperial bodyguard said, That's right. Because the late emperor believed in the Taoist yin-yang 8 trigrams technique, he specially built 12 bell towers around the Imperial Mausoleum. This place is located in the northwest of the Imperial Mausoleum, which is the Qian position on the 8 trigrams diagram. Therefore, the bell tower at the back will ring 3 times every morning to inform the late emperor's spirit in heaven. Xiao Yuni was puzzled. Shouldn't it be rung every day at Su or Hai? Why is it in the morning? It's precisely because of the Qian position that yin and yang complement each other. Naturally, he had to choose the time of the 8 trigrams. This was a rule set by the late emperor himself when he was still alive. Ning Shu immediately said, in other words, the bell tower only rings once a day at 7 in the morning? The young imperial bodyguard said, That's right. Ning Shu's eyes lit up and she immediately ran towards the bell tower. I guessed right, it's really it. This is the trap set up by Lu Laosan. Chapter 596. We've always been puzzled as to how Lu Laosan managed to set up the imperial tomb. Especially after the stone tablet appeared, His Majesty sent people to surround the imperial mausoleum. No matter how capable he was, there was no way he could get close enough to do anything. The only time he could sneak into the imperial mausoleum was when he delivered food in the evening. So, how did he do it in broad daylight in front of everyone? I finally figured it out now. In fact, he had already chosen the best helper, which was this clock tower. Because of her excitement, Ning Shu's forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat. The tiredness in her eyes was swept away, and there was a dazzling light in her eyes. It was so bright that people couldn't look at her directly, but they couldn't help being attracted to her. There were more than 100 steps in the clock tower, and it was 8 feet tall. Ning Shu held the corner of her clothes and spun around until she reached the highest point. Following the thick and heavy bronze clock in front of her, Ning Shu looked up at the dome and found the mechanism. It's really like this. It's that small crossbow. Do you see the iron wire tied to the top of the clock? The other end of the bell was fixed to the full string of the crossbow. Every time the bell was struck by someone, it would affect the iron wire. When the iron wire left its position, the object on the string would leave the string and fly towards the target that had been designed long ago. The second finger was cut off in this way. As for the Blood Lotus script, although it was only a piece of silk, it only needed to wrap a small stone in it. After it left the string, the small stone would fall first and the silk would be blown up by the wind and slowly float to the ground, attracting everyone's attention. What Lu Laosan had to do was to come here the night before each attack and quickly set up the mechanism. When the time came the next day, everything would be done naturally. Even the person in charge of ringing the clock wouldn't know that he had helped the murderers so much. Xiao Yuni also felt that the clouds in front of him had dispersed. I see. This Lu Laosan is really scheming. I'll report to Mother now and tell her about this big progress. Ning Shu widened her eyes. But those children haven't been found yet. Lu Laosan hasn't confessed and Teacher Yuan hasn't told him his motive from 10 years ago. Shouldn't you be patient and wait for all the details to come to light before reporting to the Empress? Xiao Yuni smiled faintly. Of course we have to continue looking for them, but the case is definitely done by these two bastards. He took a step forward and gently placed his large and rough palm on the back of her hand. He gazed at her gently. Sure, you've worked hard. I will definitely tell Imperial Mother about your hard work in solving this case. I will also do my best to beg Imperial Mother to release your mother from prison as soon as possible. With me around, don't worry. Ning Shu subconsciously pulled her hand back, but he held it so tightly that she couldn't move it at all. She looked up and met with Xiao Yuni's dark and slightly red eyes. Standing on this 80 feet tall bell tower, there were more than 100 stairs that looked like a whirlpool of fate. He was like a red-eyed lion as he approached her step by step. She reminded him in a low voice, Your Highness, there's another important case. Xiao Yuni ignored her and continued to approach her until her back hit the wooden pillar behind her. Ning Shu frowned. She couldn't get rid of his grip and couldn't avoid his hot breath that was approaching her inch by inch. Your Highness, don't forget that your fiancé just met with misfortune a few days ago. Xiao Yuni lowered his head and smiled devilishly. He used his eyes to trace the shape of her lips carefully. You said it yourself. She's just my fiancé and not a proper in-law. What do I have to worry about? Ning Shu was afraid of breaking the vases. Her hands trembled violently, and she tried to turn her head away to avoid his poisonous lips. Then you don't need to care about Great Elder Princess? Are you sure that you don't need her help anymore? Xiao Yuni leaned against her neck almost greedily and breathed in her breath. I don't deny that I really needed her half a month ago. So even if I didn't like her daughter, even if I always had you in my heart, when Imperial Father granted me the marriage, I still forced myself to smile and agree to the marriage. But now, I have a simpler way. I don't need to rely on anyone. I only need to rely on myself. Sure, Xiahou Qing doesn't want you anymore, does he? I saw it that night. Now he avoids you and doesn't even want to look at you. Then, why are you still so obsessed with him? Let's go back to the past, okay? As long as we have the past. Chapter 597. The scorching sun was like fire, as if it wanted to dry every drop of water in her body. Her injuries had yet to heal, and she had not slept for the entire night. She had only been holding on with one breath the entire time and was already at the end of her rope. Her vision turned black. She bit the tip of her tongue hard, letting the strong smell of blood from her wound help her stay awake. Your Highness, I don't know what you mean by what you said, and I don't understand what you mean by in the past. I only wanted to save my mother, so whether it's Mr. Xiahou or Your Highness, I don't have the time or energy to care about them. Your Highness, please be magnanimous and let me. MPH. Before she could finish, Xiao Yuni pressed her hands above her head. What if I don't? His hot breath stuck to her cheeks, his gaze seeming to want to swallow her whole. Do you think I'm still the same as before, easily bewitched by your endless excuses? Sure, you're right about something. You're not who you were in the past, and I'm not who I was in the past either. Today, the scenery on this clock tower is very good. I want you to remember one thing. You're mine. Ning Shu gritted her teeth, purposely biting her lips until they were full of blood. Your Highness, I'm a human. I'm definitely not someone's possession. I'm begging you for the last time. Let me down. Don't make me hate you. She thought that seeing those dampening blood and wounds would make Xiao Yuni return in disappointment, but she did not expect that it would arouse the evil in him instead. He grabbed her wrists with one hand and wiped away the blood on her lips with the other. Even if you hate me, it's okay. I don't care. I just want you to be by my side every day and every moment like when we were young. If you don't have a heart, then you can be a human too. As long as it's you. Humility and cruelty contradicted each other, and he turned his head, aiming for her soft lips. Ning Shu's eyes were tightly shut as transparent droplets of tears fell from the corners of her eyes. Just as her lips were about to be snatched by him, a golden bead flew through the air, aiming at his eyes. Xiao Yuni immediately turned his head to avoid that golden bead, and then a dozen thin golden leaves reflecting a glaring light flew over, forcing Xiao Yuni to let go of Ning Shu and retreat in a panic. Ning Shu slid down to sit on the floor. The tight thread in her brain snapped with a buzzing sound and was completely swallowed by the darkness. Xiao Yuni took more than 10 steps back before he managed to avoid the hidden weapons. Behind his ears, the golden leaves flew into the wooden pillar behind him, disappearing without a trace. Only the bronze bell was still humming faintly from the aftershock. Xiao Yuni narrowed his eyes and looked down the bell tower. He saw a figure standing quickly and steadily on the whirlpool-like steps. He lifted the corner of his sky-blue robe and walked up the steps step by step. A black silk cloth fluttered behind him, and his steps were unexpectedly light. Surprise flashed in Xiao Yuni's eyes. In a short time, he had adjusted his loss of control and gaffe just now and buried it in his heart. A cold smile appeared on his lips. I just heard the bad news that the prince's mansion was attacked by thieves one after another this morning and was very worried. I was thinking of going to the prince's mansion to visit the prince personally after this case was over, but I didn't expect to meet you here. It's really fate. However, seeing that the prince is still handsome and his expression is normal, I'm sure the thieves did not hurt the prince at all last night. Yuni's heart is at ease. Chapter 598. With Jiuxi's help, Xiahou Qing climbed to the top of the clock tower step by step and stopped in front of Xiao Yuni. When he saw the wound on the side of his neck, Xiao Yuni was stunned and asked worriedly, "What happened to the side of your neck? Are you injured? Is it serious? Do you need me to call an imperial physician to treat your injury?" "Thank you for your concern, Your Highness. My life is quite smooth and I won't die anytime soon." Xiahou Qing was not in the mood to pretend to be polite with him. He walked to Ning Shu's side, bent down and held her in his arms. Xiao Yuni's eyes were dark as he blocked his way and said with a faint smile, "Prince Xiahou, you're injured and it might be difficult for you to hold Shu'er. Let me do it." Xiahou Qing's hands were as gentle as he held Ning Shu, but his expression was as cold as when he faced Xiao Yunyan. "If I let you do it, would I give you another chance to hurt her?" Xiao Yunyan's face sank as his facade was torn apart. He sneered, "That's right. I admit that my actions just now really scared her. But what I did was just because I couldn't control my feelings after suppressing them for a long time. But wasn't it you who really made her sad? I saw it that night. You left her alone outside the cold palace gate and cried so sadly. That was something that had never happened when we were together before. Xiahou Qing, what right do you have to criticize me? Xiahou Qing's fingertips trembled, and a deep pain flashed past his jade-white face. However, he was unable to open his mouth to provide an unnecessary explanation for himself. He held Ning Shu tightly in his arms and said with an unprecedented fierceness in his voice, "Get out of the way." Xiao Yuni pressed his hand on his sword, his murderous intent showing. "What if I don't do it today?" Jiusi was the first to unsheath his sword. Following his signal, the guards of the Duke's mansion quickly appeared and surrounded Xiao Yuni's entourage. Then, "Your Highness, please take a look around and see how powerful our Duke of Nanping is." The veins on Xiao Yuni's arms bulged. Under the vast sky, he wore golden armor and a scarlet-red cloak as he stood opposite Xiahou Qing's azure gauze gown. One was dense like blood, the other was cold like ice, and they silently overflowed with killing intent. Until Xiao Yuni's personal attendant dared to persuade him in a low voice. "The Empress is still waiting for you in the central palace. Your Highness, let's go back first. There's no rush." Xiao Yuni closed his eyes harshly, and the attendant almost thought that he was going to kill him. However, he saw his hand on the sword slowly loosen, and when he opened his eyes again, he was calm and composed. "Mr. Xiahou, I have something important to do, so I won't be catching up with you. I'll definitely have a chance to drink and chat with you another day. I heard that you're proficient in chess." Chapter 599. Below the clock tower, in the pavilion, rubbing her dizzy head, Ning Shu opened her eyes with difficulty. She opened her mouth but couldn't make a sound for a long time. Only when the warm tea was brought to her lips and she swallowed mouthful by mouthful did she gradually regain consciousness. "Forsythia, Zigue, why are you here?" Ning Shu called out with a hoarse voice. Seeing that she had woken up, Forsythia put the empty cup to the side in surprise. But when she looked carefully at her appearance, tears almost fell. "Miss, why didn't you keep your word? Yesterday morning, we had a good talk. This servant prepared a table of delicious food for you to eat at the foo tonight. In the end, we didn't see you the entire night." This servant was very worried and pulled Zigue to the Supreme Court to ask. "The Supreme Court said that you went to the docks, so we ran to the docks. The people at the docks said that there was a fire just now and a handsome official was seriously injured. We heard the description and thought it was you, so we quickly ran to the medical hall. Only then did we know that it was official Tan. The two of us ran all over the capital before we met that little brother called Tianwan. After asking him, we rushed here to find you. Miss, how are you? Your complexion is so bad, and there are dark circles under your eyes. This servant doesn't want to scold you, but you don't cherish yourself too much. If the Junju knew you were like this in prison, I don't know how distressed she would be. Do you think you are made of iron?" Ning Shu smiled and wiped away the golden beads on her face. She comforted, "Aren't I? Your miss fine? It's just that I was too anxious to investigate the case and didn't sleep the entire night. Coupled with the heat, I fell asleep for a while. Now that I've slept, I'm much better. Don't worry, although your miss is not made of iron, there is a good saying. A scourge lives for 1,000 years. I haven't done enough scourge in this world. I haven't eaten enough good food, and my little beauty Forsythia hasn't been doted on enough." Forsythia was amused and angry by her. "Miss, keep talking nonsense. I'm not talking to you anymore." Ning Shu pinched the tip of her nose and smiled as she turned to look at Zigue, who was silently wiping away the sweat on her forehead with a handkerchief. She said softly, "Don't worry, my good Zigue. I'm fine." Zigue's nose turned sour. He took her hand and wrote seriously on her palm, "Miss, I will never leave you again." Ning Shu smiled and held her hand tightly in his palm, infinitely warm. "Okay, I won't leave you again." She suddenly thought of something and asked, "By the way, did you meet anyone else on your way here?" Zigue could not answer and pulled Forsythia anxiously. Forsythia said foolishly. Of course, there are many guards on duty here. We didn't have a token when we came in, so we were almost stopped by the guards outside. Until a supervisor passed by and heard that we were your maidservants, he let us in. Ning Shu bit her lip and said hesitantly, I mean, other than those guards and eunuchs, was there anyone else? Was I lying in the pavilion alone at the time, and no one carried me down? The moment she fainted, she clearly felt that someone had appeared and helped her out. Then, that person used an incomparably gentle strength to pull her into an embrace and whispered in her ear. Furthermore, there seemed to be moist water droplets sliding down her cheeks and into her neck. That person was especially like Xiaoqing. Forsythia blinked her large watery eyes and said blankly, You weren't in the pavilion at the time. We found you on the clock tower, fainted in the corner alone. We shouted for a long time, but there was no response. Then Zhigue hurriedly carried you down and rested in the pavilion for a long time. Miss, I don't know who you were talking about, but other than us, there really was no one else. Chapter 600. So it's like that. Ning Shu sighed softly, her voice full of disappointment. Forsythia asked, Miss, what's wrong? Are you looking for someone important? Perhaps we missed it when we came. How about this servant go and ask the guards one by one for Miss? This servant will go right away. Forsythia was very mobile. She lifted the corner of her dress and ran outside. Ning Shu hurriedly pulled her back and said awkwardly, There's no one important. It's just that your Miss is dreaming about being infatuated. All right, I've rested enough. Serve your Miss and get me up. We've finished investigating the problems here. Let's go to the next stop. Before that, let's find a restaurant to eat to my heart's content and properly worship my 5 Viscera temple. Forsythia didn't suspect her and said with a smile, All right. This servant remembers that there's a restaurant 3 li east of the Imperial Mausoleum that you like to eat. The proprietress's steamed fish is the best. Let's go now. Ning Shu smiled and nodded. Forsythia and Zhigue treated her like a treasure and supported her to the door. After stepping out of the Imperial Mausoleum, she hesitated for a while before turning back to ask the guards. She learned that there were only 2 groups of people who came to the Imperial Mausoleum today. The 6th prince had something to do and left in a hurry. Forsythia and Zhigue arrived one after the other. There was no one else. Ning Shu finally gave up. She said, Sorry for the disturbance. She lifted the corner of her dress and boarded the carriage. Her long eyelashes covered the bamboo curtain, hiding the dense loneliness in her eyes. It wasn't until Zhigue waved his horsewhip and the Ning family carriage completely disappeared at the end of the road that a figure silently appeared at the door. You all did well. If Miss Ning comes back to ask again, you must say that my Shitsi has never been here. Thank you on behalf of my Shitsi. After tipping the guards of the Imperial Mausoleum one by one, Josie silently disappeared again. Zhigue drove the carriage smoothly on the street. Forsythia leaned against the window and sighed. In the past, this street was very lively, especially on the 7th day of the 7th month. All the girls in the city came out to shop and buy beautiful cloth, new styles of jewelry, and new fragrances and rouges. They put up all the good food and fun things for sale. There were so many people on the street that not even a drop of water could trickle through. Just because of the recent cases, everyone is scared out of their wits. Even the peddlers can't be seen. I'm afraid this year's begging festival won't be lively. Ning Shu held her chin in her hands. Is it that my little Forsythia is worried that the festival won't be lively and will prevent you from meeting a good husband? Lian Xiao blushed, Miss. Why are you making fun of me? This servant doesn't want a good husband. This servant just wants to accompany young Miss to celebrate the begging festival happily. After all, this is the last begging festival before your 17th birthday. As she spoke, Forsythia couldn't help but feel lonely. Although they purposely didn't mention it, as long as they didn't mention it, they could pretend that nothing had happened. However, everyone knew in their hearts that what was to come would come. There was only a month left until Ning Shu's 17th birthday. Ning Shu pinched her chubby cheeks and said, Don't worry, my good Lian Xiao. This 7th day of the 7th month is indeed the last Chiqiao festival before I turn 17, but I promise, it definitely won't be the last one in my life. Unless you don't trust your miss at all. Of course I trust her. Who is my miss? She studied under the female Zhuge Liang. She solves cases like a god. Her intelligence is better than Ban Jieyu, and her beauty is better than Diao Chan. Forsythia was halfway through her flattery when the carriage suddenly shook violently. Forsythia was thrown to the other side of the carriage and collided with Ning Shu. She was shocked and shouted, "Ah, Zigue, what's going on?" Outside the carriage, Zigue tightly held onto the reins in her hands to control the horse and avoid a violent collision from the front. She opened her mouth to remind Ning Shu and the others to hold on to the door and not be thrown off, but her empty mouth could only make a short ah sound, which represented her inner anxiety. Forsythia clung to the wall of the carriage and looked out. A horse that seemed to have lost its mind was pulling a cart towards them. Zigue tried her best to avoid it, but another cart followed closely behind. "Miss, be careful." Chapter 601. Seeing that the two horses were about to crash into each other, Ning Shu and Forsythia clung to the wall of the carriage. The crazy horse in front suddenly neighed in pain, and its huge body fell to the ground without warning. Together with the handcart behind it, it made a deafening roar. When the horse carriage finally stabilized, Lian Xiao covered her heart that was almost scared silly and hurriedly jumped down from the horse carriage. After taking a closer look, she put her palms together and prayed to the heavens. "Oh my God, this is too scary." Luckily, there was a rope that tripped the horse's hooves. Otherwise, the consequences today would be unimaginable. Umitba, the heavens really have eyes. Ning Shu thought for a moment and said, "Rope? Where did the rope come from?" Forsythia looked around for a long time. "I don't know. Maybe someone accidentally dropped it here and tripped the horse's hooves, indirectly saving our lives." She hugged her mistress's arm in fear and said, "Mistress, a few days ago, Princess Helui was hit by an ox cart and died suddenly. Today, we met a crazy horse. I'm so scared." Ning Shu was exceptionally calm and even had the mood to joke. "Accidents happen every day in the capital. It's just that we happened to meet it today. Fortunately, it's scary but not dangerous. Moreover, I haven't reached my 17th birthday yet. That person has waited for so many years. How could he be willing to waste all his efforts? Don't worry, don't scare yourself." The passers-by quickly came forward to help tie up the crazy horse and waited for the magistrate to deal with it. Zigue repeatedly confirmed that Ning Shu and Forsythia were fine and got on the carriage to continue on their way. Ning Shu looked back for a long time, but didn't find the person she was thinking of in the crowd. She pursed her lips and thought to herself, "Did I think too much again?" She didn't know that after their carriage had gone far, another carriage quietly appeared at the corner. Juicy carried two masked men who had been knocked unconscious and threw them at Xiao Qing's feet. "Heir apparent, we caught these two killers nearby. The two crazy horses just now were done by them." Xiao Qing's voice was extremely cold. "Whip them 100 times. Find a chance to let them go. I want to see who dares to touch her." "Yes," Juicy requested. "Miss Ning has already walked 500 feet. Should we continue to follow?" "Let's go." The burning pain from his internal organs pierced through his entire body, causing fine beads of cold sweat to seep out of his back. He clenched his fists and silently swallowed the pain that was 10 times, 100 times worse. His slightly curved lips were infinitely gentle. "I can't be at ease if she's alone. Be careful, she's as cunning as a fox. Don't let her find out. We're here, we're here." Up ahead is the Drunken Immortal Tavern. Forsythia's thoughts came and went quickly. When she saw the signboard of Drunken Immortal House, her eyes lit up. She happily helped Ning Shu out of the car. The enthusiastic waiter immediately greeted them. Come in, distinguished guests, please take a seat." Forsythia was very generous. According to Ning Shu's taste, she ordered 8 hot dishes and 4 cold dishes in one go, filling the big table. The three of them ate heartily. Ning Shu enjoyed the food while explaining the current case to them. She didn't know that just upstairs, less than 10 feet away from her, there was a person who didn't know the taste of food, but was enjoying the same food as her. It was as if he was sitting with her. After a full meal, Ning Shu put down the silver chopsticks, paid the bill, and left. The case had progressed to this point. When Hui Mo arrested Yuan Wanting and Lu Laosan and brought them to justice and interrogated them, important progress would be made. Time waits for no man. Zigue went to drive the car first. Ning Shu and Forsythia waited in the lobby. Suddenly, a waiter behind them shouted in panic. "The handle is broken. Hot oil. Get out of the way. Get out of the way." Ning Shu turned around and saw the waiter holding a pot of hot oil with a broken handle stumbling towards the lobby. The hot oil was smoking. The waiter's hands were red. Once he couldn't hold on, the oil would splash and disfigure him. For a moment, the guests panicked and avoided the oil. Ning Shu pulled Forsythia and turned around to run. Unexpectedly, one of the guests stepped on Forsythia's skirt and fell down with Ning Shu. At the same time, the waiter couldn't hold the pot of hot oil anymore. He loosened his grip and splashed it towards Ning Shu. Ning Shu subconsciously lowered her head and raised her sleeve to protect Forsythia's face. Just as the pot of hot oil was about to splash over, a table suddenly flipped over, blocking in front of Ning Shu and the rest, catching the pot of hot oil. The oil splattered along the legs of the table and flowed to the ground, creating a mess. Some people were splashed a little, but fortunately, none of them were seriously injured. The table completed its task and fell to the ground with a bang. The waiter, and the guests in the lobby were still in a panic. There were 2 accidents in 2 hours. Forsythia was so scared that her legs turned to jelly and her whole body trembled. She raised her head and saw her miss smiling after a short moment of shock. "Miss, why are you still in the mood to smile?" Was her miss scared silly? Ning Shu pulled Lian Xiao up from the ground and tidied up her clothes. Her curved eyebrows and eyes were smiling mysteriously. Her watery eyes were like the clear sky. "Of course I have to smile. It is so interesting." Chapter 602. Forsythia was completely confused. "Miss, what are you talking about?" Ning Shu couldn't help but laugh. "Nothing. It's just that there's a guy who's so cute and awkward that I really want to pinch him and—" Halfway through her sentence, her cheeks were dyed with a layer of spring and her mind couldn't stop daydreaming. She lightly coughed a few times and patted her face, quickly changing the topic. "Cough, cough. Look, Zigua brought the carriage over. Let's get in." Forsythia looked at the mess in the hall and was full of fear. She hurriedly got up and said, "Okay, miss, slow down a bit. I'll help you." As the master and servant walked through the threshold of the drunken immortal residence, Ning Shu raised her head to look at the sky. Using her hand as a fan, she said in a clear voice, "This day is really hot. It would be great if we could find a stall selling brown sugar ice powder. It would be best if it was mixed with sweet and refreshing fruits. That would definitely be the best way to relieve the heat. Don't you think so, Lianxiao?" As Ning Shu's absolute support, little Forsythia nodded repeatedly. "Ah, yes. Miss, are you saying it so loudly for this servant to hear?" Ning Shu deliberately glanced behind her and said with a smile, "Is that so? It's just a casual remark. Those who want to hear it will hear it, and those who don't need to care." After Ning Shu and her servant left, on the 2nd floor of Drunken Immortal House, Xiahou Qing slowly walked out from behind a screen painted with a lotus pond beauty, Huan Shi sand, and sighed helplessly. "She knows." Juicy frowned. "We've been hiding our tracks before, but this basin of oil came unexpectedly. If we didn't act, the 2 girls would have been burned. Miss Ning is also very attentive. She guessed it immediately. What should we do next?" Xiahou Qing's lips overflowed with a wry smile. She deliberately said that just now for me to hear. "What can I do?" "Continue to follow." He silently clenched his fingertips. "When we can't hide anymore, we can only—" Forsythia felt that after the 2 accidents in a row, their luck seemed to have taken a turn and suddenly exploded. Just as the young lady said she wanted to eat brown sugar ice powder, they met at the corner after a few steps. Then the young miss muttered that although the ice powder was delicious, It was a little too sweet to eat too much at once. At this time, if there were fresh and sweet big lotus seeds to eat, they would be sweet and refreshing, which would be excellent. Sure enough, half a street later, they saw Wang selling lotus seed heads. Every single lotus seed head on the basket was dark green and eye-catching, and there were even ice-cold water droplets rolling around them. One look was enough to make people happy. Ningxu smiled like a flower. She ordered for Scythia to buy a bunch of them. She folded her sleeves and peeled them one by one into her palm. Chapter 603. Miss, there are so many people buying colored paper. The good ones are almost all sold out. Should we also buy some back to the residents to prepare for Miss to attend the begging festival? Lian Xiao stood on her tiptoes to look inside and was almost pushed to the ground by the crowd. Ningxu grabbed her and pointed to the crowd. Are you sure you can squeeze in? Forget it. Even if I buy them back, I don't have time to make lanterns. Let's just buy 2 charcoal pins and go. Forsythia was disappointed. Okay. Ningxu took Forsythia through the girls' dresses. It was not easy to buy charcoal pins, but it was difficult to squeeze them out. As soon as she walked out of the Once-You pavilion, she saw Huimo rushing to her, panting, I finally found you. Lady Ning, something bad happened? Something bad happened. Don't panic. Tell me slowly. What happened? Ningxu's eyebrows suddenly jumped and she had a bad feeling. Is there something wrong with Yuan Wanting? Huimo was sweating profusely. He gritted his teeth in frustration. I followed your order and immediately went to arrest Yuan Wanting. It went very smoothly. Yuan Wanting didn't say a word. He confessed that he had tampered with the stone tablet 10 years ago. But I didn't expect that as soon as I escorted him to the Supreme Court, the 6th Prince's men took him away by force. They also said that the case would be handed over to them, and we didn't need to intervene. What about Lu Laosan and his wife? Huimo was angry. They also have them. What does 6th Prince mean? Does he want to compete with us? After using us, you kick us away. You're in a hurry to kill us before the grinding is even done. Isn't that bullying? Ningxu bit her finger hard and frowned. She pulled Huimo up and said, Let's go. Come with me to find Xiao Yuni. Get him back. Huimo frowned. But what if Xiao Yuni doesn't give it to us? Ningxu looked around and saw that the horse carriage was moving too slowly. She immediately took off the harness and held onto the saddle. Her body was like a crescent moon as she stepped onto the horse's back. Even if you don't want to give it to me, I will bring them back. Huema and Zigue, follow me. Lian Xiao, I will leave the rest to you. 3 fine horses whizzed past under the scorching sun. The hooves of the horses sounded half of the capital, but the eyes of the people on the horses were firm. No matter how bumpy the horses were, they did not waver in the slightest. Only Forsythia, who was left behind, stomped her feet in grief and indignation. Miss, why am I always the one left behind? Ever since the establishment of the Imperial Guard, Dragon City, Shunwu, and Yulin Guards had been the 3 pillars of the Imperial Guard. They kept each other in check and balance. However, as the rulers of the previous dynasties changed and the emperor's preferences changed drastically, today, Yulin Guards had declined and existed in name only. Only Dragon City and Shinwu Guards each held power, and the Dragon City Guard camp that Xiao Yuni was in charge of was located 10 miles north of the Imperial Palace. It was located on the same line as the Imperial Palace and the Meridian Gate. It was the most advantageous protective barrier around the Imperial Palace. Its position was self-evident. This was also the reason why Xiao Yuni did not hesitate to risk his life to obtain the seal. There were more than 30,000 soldiers in Yangchengwei. The camp was connected like a small mountain. Looking at it from afar, people could not help but feel frightened. Lady Ning, are we really going in? They have more people, and we have less people. After we go in, we must act according to the situation. It is not worthwhile to suffer a big loss for the case. Sigh, it is only a pity that we are in the capital and not in Yunyan province. Otherwise, who knows who will be afraid of who? Huema had not dismounted from the horse and started to talk nonstop. Even Zigue rolled his eyes in disgust. It seemed that he and his good brother Shi Yin were really a family. Ning Shu was not afraid at all. She pulled the reins and stopped in front of the camp. She introduced herself. "Who are you? What is the matter?" "Your Sixth Highness is in the camp. Tell him that I am Ning Shu. He will know what is going on." "Sure, you should know better than anyone that there are no fish when the water is too clear. There were some things that didn't need to be investigated too closely. As long as the general situation was right and the most fundamental problem was solved, what did the details matter? You found the evidence yourself, and the process of the crime was also cleared up by you. Brother Huiyamo, beside, you can also prove it. That Yuan Wanting confessed everything as soon as he saw the soldiers. What's there to hesitate about? Isn't the most important thing now to announce the results of this case to the public as soon as possible to prove Mother's innocence, and also to eliminate the fear of the people in the capital? As for the children that we haven't found, we will definitely be able to find out their whereabouts from the criminals after 2 days of torture. Sure, you don't have to worry." His attitude made it clear that he didn't want Ning Shu to intervene, but the more he acted like this, the more it aroused the doubts in Ning Shu's heart. She clenched her fists and argued. "Yes, your Highness is right. There are no fish when the water is too clear. There are priorities, and the overall situation should be the most important. If it was other things, Ning Shu wouldn't be able to say anything. But this case was taken over by me personally. It's too hasty to conclude that it was done by them based on the clues we found. There were many unjust and false cases in the world because of this. If I accidentally wronged them in order to close the case as soon as possible, even if Ning Shu blindfolded herself, she wouldn't be able to face her conscience. Your Highness said that the case has basically been investigated. Then have they confessed their motive? Where did they get the guts to be enemies with the royal family for no reason and frame the Empress? If your Highness can't even convince me, how can you convince the millions of people in the world?" Chapter 605. In the face of Ning Shu's interrogation, the smile on Xiao Yunyi's face turned cold. He looked at the fierce and arrogant fangs in his palm, narrowed his eyes, and looked back at Ning Shu with a faint smile. "I've investigated. Yuan Wanting is a scholar who has never passed. His ancestors were the lowliest masons. He has tried many times to pass the Jinshu exam but failed. He is full of anger and even has a twisted mentality. He can't be judged by common sense. His neighbors have heard many times that he was dissatisfied with the court after drinking, so it makes sense that he bribed Lu Laosan and his wife to do this case. Moreover, Yuan Wanting was a teacher of the academy. His first lost child, Qian Dongbao, was his student. This kind of person is the best at bewitching the hearts of young children. It's only natural that he would do this series of cases. As for the statement you want, I can make it public in less than 2 hours. Sure, do you have any other doubts?" Looking at Xiao Yunyi, who had completely torn off his mask, Ning Shu's heart turned cold. Her nails dug into her palms, and she could not hide her shock and anger. "Your Highness, are you going to make a confession by torture?" Looking at the undisguised anger and disappointment on Ning Shu's face, Xiao Yunyi felt a stab of pain in the deepest part of his heart that had been deliberately buried. The image of the two of them sitting on a tree branch and looking at the sunset as they talked about their lifelong dreams when they were young floated in front of him like smoke. He subconsciously closed his eyes and let go of the Iwu under his palm. He walked in front of Ning Shu and forcefully peeled off the ink in front of him. He looked at Imo Rohai in dark brown and said in a low voice, "Sure, even if it's for the peace of the country and the safety of the people, don't cause any more trouble. I can promise you that as long as you don't touch this case again, I, Xiao Yunyi, will use my life as a promise to keep your mother safe. But if you are stubborn and insist on holding on to this case, then no one can guarantee what the result will be. Sure, do you understand what I mean?" Ning Shu's body trembled and her eyes widened in shock. She said in a trembling voice, "Are you using my mother's safety to warn me?" "It's not a warning, but a kind persuasion. Sure, you know that I can treat everyone in the world coldly, but I can't bear to treat you that way. Otherwise, I would have already. There were some words that he almost blurted out, but he forcefully restrained himself at the crucial moment. He bent down and spoke in a voice that only the two of them could hear. Sure, I don't care if you remember or not, but for the sake of our 12 years of friendship, listen to my advice. This case will end here. Don't investigate any further. After that, I will immediately arrange for you to leave the capital. The longer you stay here, the closer you are to the unknown danger. I can't tell you too much. I can only tell you that this is a vortex that has spanned 25 years. You, Xiaoqing, your mother, great elder princess, we are all playthings in that person's hands. No matter who you want to save, you are destined to die with them in vain. Go, don't hesitate. Now the situation is the most chaotic. I will find a way to help you leave here. When the situation is stable, I will take you back, and you will be my empress. Coming out of the camp, Ning Shu was still trapped in that unspeakable fear. She was sweating because of the summer wind, but she couldn't help but want to hug herself to resist the bone-chilling coldness. Huiyamo obviously noticed that something was wrong with her. Lady Ning, what's wrong with you? What did Xiao Yuni say to you just now? At this time, he was still chattering. Zigui angrily pushed him aside and hugged his miss with his body. She couldn't say anything, and only a pair of watery eyes showed her worries. Leaning against Zigui for a long time, Ning Shu found the temperature in her body. She shook her head and forced a smile. Nothing. He just warned me not to investigate any further. Huiyamo hesitated and said, Then, what are you going to do? Are you going to investigate or not? Ning Shu turned her head to look at the solemn and serene tints behind her, the cold gleam of swords and sabers. Then she looked at the noisy human world a street away. In the end, she closed her eyes and allowed herself to bathe in the most dazzling sun in the world. She said, Investigate. The more they stop it, the more it shows that there are still many doubts in this case. Xiao Yuni is afraid, the Empress is afraid, and what they are most afraid of is the truth. If they pave the road to Mother's safety with other people's blood, then Mother will hate the safety obtained in this way. Chapter 606. Huiyamo scratched his head and smiled bitterly, but the witnesses are all in their hands. How can we investigate next? Rely on luck? Ning Shu pondered for a moment, and then called Huiyamo and Zigui to get on the horse. She waited until the camp was 2 li away from them and there was no one around before she slowed down and asked, Huiyamo, did you find anything else when you were trying to catch Yuan Wanting? Huiyamo said, Yuan Wanting's house is broken. Except for the frightened children in the yard, the house is full of alcohol. We didn't find anything useful for a long time. However, when I came to arrest him, he said something very strange. He said, Since you're here, there's no need to trouble you to use your knife. I'll go with you. Although my house is poor, the pile of books is still worth a few copper coins. Don't mess them up for me. When I come back, I still need to sell them for wine. It feels like he knew that we were going to arrest him. Ning Shu added, He knew that he would be arrested, but he didn't run away? Huiyamo nodded repeatedly. Yes, that's what I meant. This person is always strange and muddle-headed. I don't know what he is thinking. On the way to the Supreme Court, he was still laughing. I said to him, Why are you laughing when you are about to eat prison food? He laughed even more arrogantly and said that the prison food in the Supreme Court was good. Unfortunately, even if he ate prison food, he wouldn't be able to eat this house. Later, I thought that he seemed to have expected that he would be kidnapped by Xiao Yuni. Damn it, don't say that he is a teacher. It is more believable to say that he is a fortune teller who set up a stall under the Taiping Bridge. Ning Shu's eyebrows twitched. Her sweaty hair stuck to her beautiful cheeks. She raised her hand and wiped it casually. So, he has expected everything today, but he didn't go anywhere. He just waited at home. This person is definitely not as simple as revenge. Let's go back to Aoshuang Academy and take a closer look. Huiyamo pulled a long face. Are we leaving again? I haven't eaten lunch yet. Ning Shu took out a wrapped meat patty from her sleeve and threw it to him. Here, It's ready for you. Wow, Lady Ning, you're so nice. It smells so good. Wait, wait, wait. Let me finish eating before we leave. What if I choke to death while eating? You really don't know how to take care of women. Sigh. I can almost figure out where the capital is with my eyes closed. Regardless of whether Huimo was willing or unwilling, resentful or sad, they once again arrived at the gate of the Ao Shuang Academy. The students inside naturally went home in a panic. After a careful search by the officials, the gate of the academy was opened. The worthless junk inside was torn apart, and the fragments of wine jars were scattered all over the ground. They had to be careful when they walked. Even a thief would not be interested in patronizing this place. Ning Shu and the others carefully avoided the mess on the ground and pushed open Yuan Wanting's study, which was also his living room. His precious books that were waiting to be exchanged for wine were still there, but each of them seemed to have been flipped through and were scattered on the ground. No one cared about them. Ning Shu flipped through the books on the floor one by one and found that they were all common books and biographies that could be found on the market. She didn't even see a single copy of a famous classic, so she couldn't see anything special about them. Huimo. I've checked the 4 treasures of the study one by one, and I didn't find anything wrong with them. Zigue held the book and shook his head. Ning Shu frowned in confusion. It shouldn't be like this. Just when Ning Shu was muttering to herself, Huimo's eyes turned and he suddenly shouted behind, "Who is it?" Chapter 607. Who is it? Come out. Huimo's hand was faster than his eyes. Before his voice died away, he had already grabbed the boy and flew out. The short figure behind the door immediately rushed out like a frightened animal. It's a kid? Ning Shu looked at the little chubby figure in astonishment, especially the wooden slingshot on his belt, which overlapped with a certain image in her mind. Qian Dongbao? Huimo, chase him. Don't worry, I'll take care of him. Huimo said nothing and chased after him. He wiped his hair handsomely and pounced on the chubby boy like a hungry tiger. Little chubby boy, if you know what's good for you, you'd better send yourself to me. He was about to show off his martial arts skills. Unexpectedly, as soon as he chased out of the alley, his target had been tied up into a small meatball and thrown at the entrance of the alley, crying. He complained, "Tut, who is this? You're ruining my opportunity to show off my heroic figure." Ning Shu looked at the empty alley far away and smiled. This person may not be easy to deal with. I advise you to keep your voice down, or you may be in trouble in the future. Well, don't talk nonsense. Bring the little guy back. Huimo didn't know why, but he felt a chill on his back. The secret of saving his life for many years made him shut up quickly and obediently carried the chubby boy back to the academy. After untying the chubby boy rushed to the big locust tree in the courtyard and looked at them timidly. Huimo wanted to catch him again, but was stopped by Ning Shu. Ning Shu bent her knees and kept the same height as him. She said softly, "Your name is Qian Dongbao, right? Can you tell me where you have been these days? Your mother misses you very much at home, and your father has been looking for you every day under the hot sun. Why don't you go home?" Qian Dongbao hugged behind the locust tree, and his chubby little hands dug into the bark. He whispered, I know they all miss me, but I can't go back. Why? But what did Master Yuan say to you? Have you been hiding near the academy? The little fatty lowered his head and did not say anything. Ning Shu was not discouraged and continued to ask, "Why did he ask you to hide? Other than you, are there any other children? Wang Xiaosheng, Zhao Mian Ling do you recognize these children?" Little fatty still didn't say anything. Huimo became irritable. "Little fatty, don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. We almost turned the capital upside down these 2 days. We didn't even sleep or eat, just to save you little brats. You guys, on the other hand, foolishly risking your lives for the wicked. Be careful not to be killed, do you know that?" Qian Dongbao became anxious. He raised his head and shouted, "The headmaster didn't trick us. The headmaster was a good man. You're not allowed to talk nonsense." "Hey, What kind of bewitching potion did Yuan Wanting feed you to brainwash you like this? Hui Mo was so angry that he rolled up his sleeves and wanted to rush over and beat the boy to wake him up. Ning Shu glared at him and asked him to go aside first. Then she thought for a moment and changed the way she asked, Dong Bao, I asked your classmates, including your mother. They all said that you were a smart boy. Since you are here, there must be something important. Is it because Master Yuan expected that we would come, so he asked you to pass a message to us? Compared to Hui Mo, Ning Shu was really a good person. Qin Dongbao nodded and said, Yes, it was the headmaster who asked me to wait for you here. He said that he would definitely be arrested in these 2 days. Except for the officers, there must be other people who would come here to look for him. He asked me to stay here and watch carefully. If I see you, I have to give you 2 things. Little Fatty took out something wrapped in paper from his arms and threw it in front of Ning Shu. Ning Shu caught it and opened the paper. There was another silver ingot inside. Then she smoothed the paper. There was a line of crooked words written in cinnabar. What is the riddle? Please answer. From now on, the riddle will last for 24 hours. If you can't answer the riddle in 1 day, I will give you a child's body. After 7 days, all of you will die. Heaven's Choice 15. Living Dead Yuan Wanting. Chapter 608. The short sentence made Hui Mo panic and his scalp tingle. What is this? Little Fatty. Before he could finish screaming, Little Fatty suddenly scampered off again. This time the door was tightly closed, and Hui Mo and the others were in front of him. He knew that he couldn't escape, so he got into the house. Hui Mo was so angry that he laughed. Hey, you little fatty, do you still want to run away? There are only 2 rooms inside. Let's see where you can run to. If you know what's good for you, hurry up and come out. Otherwise, if I catch you, I will definitely beat your ass. There were 2 rustling sounds in the house, but there was no one. It seemed that the little guy was ready to fight to the end. Hui Mo was not polite at all. He called Zigue, and the 2 rolled up their sleeves to catch the little fatty. Hui Mo was in front of the house, and Zigue went around to block the back of the house. Ning Shu felt that it was too thick-skinned for 2 adults to deal with a little kid, so she rolled up her sleeves and went in to help. Yuan Wanting was so poor that all his belongings were in this shabby house. All the broken things in the house could not be exchanged for 5 taels of silver. However, the place was spacious. After entering the house, there was an empty hall. There was nothing else but a dozen broken tables and chairs in the middle. It seemed that it was a formal study room, but it was not used often. Only in winter, when the little monkeys couldn't stand the cold, they were driven in to get warm. Anyway, they cheated the money from Yuan Wanting. They couldn't teach them a few words, but at least they wouldn't be so cold that they couldn't explain it. Behind the study room was Yuan Wanting's study room and living room. It was the place where Ning Shu and the others had just searched. There was a small cabinet, a few bookshelves, and a wooden bed under the window. Even the bed curtain couldn't be hung. The room was filled with the smell of alcohol. Next to the living room, there was a small room for storing sundries. There was a one-legged bench, a broken wooden basin, and all kinds of things. It was even worse than the house of a beggar who collected rags. It smelled very bad. Perhaps even Yuan Wanting himself knew that the stench was unbearable and unbearable to look at. So he purposely used a screen to block the front door. Only by removing the screen and stepping in could one appreciate the graceful elegance of the room. No matter how nimble Qin Dongbao was, he was still a little kid. The 3 adults who were chasing after him quickly caught sight of his short legs moving forward with all his might, as well as the sound of his panting. Hearing their footsteps, Qin Dongbao became even more anxious. He slipped through the study and hid in Yuan Wanting's living room. Ning Shu and the others smiled and followed him in. Then, they heard the sound of the folding screen being pushed and little fatty disappeared in a puff of smoke. Hui Mo was overjoyed and pushed the screen away again. He stepped into the utility room and said with a smile, Hey, little fatty, do you think the 3 of us are vegetarians? You haven't even pulled the screen door properly, and there's even a gap. You're really deceiving yourself. Let me see, which bucket are you hiding in? Or in a sack? He took a closer look and found a gray bulge in the pile of sacks. It looked like the bulge of a fat little butt. "Oh, it's here. I found it." He slapped it with all his might, but to his surprise, it was as if he had slapped a watermelon. His expression changed, and he pulled up the cloth. Only then did he realize that it wasn't Qian Dongbao. Instead, it was a watermelon that he had deliberately wrapped in the same color as his pants. Huimo's face changed. He didn't care about the dirt and immediately turned over the utility room. He didn't even let go of a palm-sized bowl. Ningxu also looked for it. The two of them searched every corner of the utility room and then ran out. They turned Yuan Wanting's living room upside down, even under the bed, but they found nothing. Huimo's face finally changed completely. He was shocked. How could it be? How could he be gone? Ningxu shouted, "Zigue!" Zigue hurriedly came in from outside and shook his head in astonishment. She had been guarding the back of the house and staring at every window to prevent little Fatty from jumping out of the window. But even so, she still lost Qian Dongbao's trace. Huimo was puzzled. He squatted on the ground and scratched his head. How could this be? I really saw Qian Dongbao running in with my own eyes. Why can't I find him? I just can't find him. There was no window in the utility room. It was impossible for him to disappear into thin air. But they also searched the living room. Zigue was guarding under the window of the living room. All the roads were blocked. Even if the boy had the ability to go to heaven and earth, he should at least dig a hole on the roof or the ground. But they squatted on the ground and searched inch by inch, but found nothing. Even Ningxu, who had been through hundreds of battles, was stunned by this scene. Chapter 609. Evil. After flipping through every corner of the AO Shuang Academy, Huimo felt like he was going to be possessed. I feel that Yuan Wanting is evil and weird. The children he deceived were also infected by him. Ningxu sighed helplessly. Huimo. Huimo cried. I know. You want to say that there are no ghosts or demons in this world, but aren't there southern border shamans? These people are the best at witchcraft. They can confuse people without anyone noticing. Do you think we were under witchcraft when we entered the AO Shuang Academy? What Qian Dongbao? We didn't see this person at all, nor did we see him run into the house. We have been looking for an illusion. Only then can I convince myself that I saw that scene just now. Otherwise, my head will explode. Huimo cried bitterly and looked at Ningxu for comfort. Ningxu kept her head down and carefully looked at the two silver ingots that appeared one after the other. She didn't have time to pay attention to him. He looked at Zigue with a pitiful look, and Zigue didn't hide it. Anyway, you are my brother-in-law. You don't even give me comfort. You are really cold and heartless. Ouch. Then he was happily beaten. Ningxu waved her hand and said, Don't make trouble. Come and see if there is any difference between these two silver ingots. What's wrong? Let me see. Huimo stopped being naughty and took the two silver ingots from Ningxu's hand. He weighed them in his hands for a long time and said strangely, The words engraved on them are Heaven's Choice 15. They are the same batch 10 years ago. The weight is about the same, but I don't feel any difference in the hand. He held the two silver ingots under the sun and raised his head to look at them carefully, but before he could see anything, several shadows suddenly flew out from behind the roof. The shadows of swords and sabers covered them like a net. Several people were shocked and quickly made a defensive posture. However, the number of opponents was twice as many. Zigue and Huimo resisted with their soft whips and long swords. They protected Ningxu behind them. However, the enemy was strong and they were weak. Each of these people was agile and ruthless. Every move was aimed at their weakness. Soon the two of them fell into a disadvantage. Zigue looked at Ningxu anxiously. Huimo blocked the blow to his chest with his sword. He endured the blood in his chest and hissed, Lady Ning, you, go first. However, the 6 blood blades had already surrounded them like turtles in a jar. Even if they had wings under their ribs, they would not be able to find a way to escape. Seeing that Zigue's arm had been slashed, an assassin's eyes shone with a fierce light as he slashed down at Ningxu with both hands. At that moment, Her heart stopped beating and her breathing stopped. Ning Shu's clear pupils shrunk into a small black star. In that black star, there was a blade glowing with blood. It was aimed at her forehead, but just as it was about to cut her in two, the arm swayed for some reason, brushing past her hair and cutting through the air. Only a strand of her hair flew down in the air. In that short moment, it seemed to be less than a second, but it made Ning Shu step back several steps. She shouted at Huiyamo, "Huiyamo, don't worry about me. They want to rob the silver ingots." However, it was too late. Huiyamo was rushing over to save her. In a hurry, he inadvertently exposed an obvious flaw. His back was hit hard by the killer, and the killer took the silver ingots from his arms. These people achieved their goal and did not want to fight anymore. They left the place at the same time, leaving only a mess. Chapter 6:10. How are your injuries? Ning Shu asked anxiously. Zigue pressed his back against the locust tree, indicating that he only had a shallow cut on his arm and that it was nothing serious. Huiyamo also shook his head and blamed himself. These people's martial arts skills are far above mine. I'm too useless. If the young master and boss were here, they wouldn't have let these thieves succeed. He sighed gloomily and muttered, "What should we do now? We lost the silver and the little fatty. How can we continue to investigate this case? Do we have to go to Yangchengwei to ask for the person again? Or should I disguise myself and sneak into the camp to see Yuan wanting?" Ning Shu turned around and tore a piece of her inner clothes to wrap the wound. She shook her head and said, "It won't be that easy. Especially since we just want to ask for the person, Xiao Yuni will definitely be more vigilant." They had a headache and were speechless for a moment. They didn't know if they should continue to look for the children or investigate Yuan Wanting's background. Let's not talk about the children first. They were very slippery. They knew that Yuan Wanting would use their lives to scare the world tomorrow, but they were still willing to be puppets. That Yuan Wanting had been hiding in the capital for 10 years and hadn't revealed himself. It was not easy to investigate. While they were in a dilemma, they heard the sound of fighting coming from outside the courtyard. The three of them looked at each other and immediately pushed the door open to look outside. Then they saw an unexpected person walking towards them from the end of the alley with something in his hand. Their eyes lit up immediately. "Boss, Juicy." It was Juicy who came from the end of the alley. He was still wearing the same silver-gray guard uniform. He was neither angry nor smiling, and there were a few fresh drops of blood on his face. When he saw Ning Shu and the others, he nodded slightly as a greeting. He wiped the 2 blood-stained silver ingots in his hands with his sleeves and threw them to Huiyamo. He only said, "Miss Ning, be careful." Then he turned and left. Huiyamo found his happiness again. "Boss, when did you come? Why didn't I know? Where's the young master? Is he in the manor or nearby? You should at least say a few words." Juicy turned back and said, "Say what? Say how useless you are. You can't even protect this little thing? Once this matter is settled, we will return to the Cloud Swallow province and start all over again." Huiyamo shut his mouth and didn't say anything. He silently sent him away. The possibility of brotherly love had never existed. It had always been an illusion in his mind. Ningshu couldn't help but take a few steps forward. She wanted to see a certain person, even if it was just a side profile or a back. But before she reached the end of the alley, the sound of the horse's hooves dragging the wheels had already left. TSK. Is this person addicted to playing hide and seek? Who spoiled him? All right, perhaps it was because all the girls in the world had spoiled him, including herself. When the dust had settled, she would give him a good lesson. The subject would be the way of the husband. After Ning Shu finished cursing, she retracted her footsteps and returned to the entrance of Ao Shuang Academy. Huiyamo was holding the 2 silver ingots and carefully looking at them. He was really curious. "Hey, what do you think is so special about these 2 silver ingots? Why did those people dare to rob them in broad daylight?" Ningshu also frowned and didn't say anything for a long time. Then she took the silver ingots back and ran to the corner to pick up a slightly larger stone. She raised her hand and unceremoniously smashed the silver ingot into two halves. Carefully looking at the cross-section, Ning Shu didn't find any problems. She didn't say anything and continued to smash the second piece of silver ingot. "Hey, what are you doing? This is evidence. You just smashed it like that. Damn." Huimo was shocked. He was just about to stop her, but when he saw the abnormal dark gray color in the center of the silver ingot, he was shocked. "This color is not right." He stepped forward and touched it. He was shocked. "Why is it lead? This piece is fake?" Throwing the stone aside, Ning Shu picked up the other half of the silver ingot. Her eyes were like a torch. She said, "To be precise, this silver ingot is made of 3 kinds of materials. The outer layer is silver, and the middle layer is white copper and lead. The ratio of these materials is very delicate. It is impossible to detect any abnormality from the appearance of the weight." "Then how did you guess that there was a problem?" Fine beads of sweat condensed into water droplets, wetting the soft hair on her temples and climbing up her slender white neck. She didn't have time to wipe it. She said with certainty, intuition, "First, there are 2 silver ingots. One was deliberately left behind by Zimo and Qin Xin last night. The second one was given to us by Qian Dongbao. If the 2 were exactly the same, Qian Dongbao wouldn't have taken the risk to appear today and give the second one to us for Yuan wanting. So, there must be a difference between the 2 silver ingots. Secondly, the actions of the men in black. We got the first piece last night, but the men in black didn't do anything until we got the second piece today. If there's no problem, then the dozens of cases I've been investigating over the years would have been for nothing." After listening to her analysis, Huimo and Zigue suddenly understood. However, before Ning Shu finished, she raised her head and looked at them with shining eyes. Her eyes were frighteningly bright. "I may know Yuan Wanting's motive." Zigue curiously moved closer. Huimo's curiosity was completely aroused. He opened his eyes widely and asked, "What is it?" "I can't tell you yet." Now we have to go to the Supreme Court and the Ministry of Justice to find out everything related to Zhao Mingzhen's case. If we are late, everything may be destroyed. Hurry up. Chapter 611. In the history of DU, the Ministry of Penalty and the Dali Temple recorded the files of serious cases. However, they focused on different things. The Ministry of Penalty mainly recorded the detailed process of the crime and the judgment, while the Dali Temple kept all kinds of testimonies and evidence. They were sweating all the way, as if they were fighting with an invisible hand. They didn't dare to stop for a moment along the way. They didn't expect that when they arrived at the Dali Temple, they were still one step late. "Someone come quickly. It's on fire. It's on fire. The storeroom is on fire." "Why is there a fire there?" "That's the place where the old case files and the judgment are stored." "Hurry up, put out the fire." Before her chest calmed down, Ning Shu raised her head and saw the thick smoke in front of her eyes. The words, "storeroom is an important place," strictly guarded, painted on the outer wall looked particularly ridiculous. She sighed and said tiredly, "It's still too late." Huimo squeezed to the front and asked several times. When he came back, he said with regret, "I've asked. A lot of testimonies, signatures, and Zhao Mingzhen's confession before committing suicide were locked in this storeroom. Looking at the fire, it should be useless." Ning Shu smiled bitterly. "Fortunately, we had the foresight to borrow some files from the Ministry of Penalty early in the morning. Otherwise, the archives there would also be a disaster. There's no other way. Let's go and read the other half of the files that I didn't finish this morning." The 3 of them had no choice but to try their best. They held the last few bundles of precious files and turned them over and over again. They wanted to squeeze every detail out of those yellowed words. At this time, it had been 32 hours since they started the case. They watched day turn to night and then to day. Now, they were about to witness the next sunset. Generally speaking, this meant that the hard work of the day had come to an end. After wiping away the sweat and carrying the hoe, one could finally go home and have a good rest, drink a bowl of water, and enjoy a full meal. Then, lying on a bamboo chair with a palm leaf fan, they could enjoy the cool moonlight and laugh as they watched their children and grandchildren chase and play barefoot in the courtyard. The most enjoyable thing in the world was joy. But for them, every passing shuttle was like an arrow on their heartstrings, and every sunset meant greater panic and the possibility of an accident coming at any time. No one knew at what time tomorrow, outside the Meridian Gate, which child's corpse would suddenly appear as a meeting gift for them. No matter how hard he tried to deny it, he couldn't hide the fact that Hui Mo was extremely tired. He held a book in his hands, and after reading 2 lines, his eyes started to blur and he started to doze off. In his half-conscious state, he heard Ning Shu talking. Although the fire destroyed all the evidence, it also confirmed my guess. He woke up with a start and opened his eyes wide to listen carefully. Ning Shu held up the book in front of her. The difficult words in the book rolled out from her mouth one by one. She slowly told the story of the dusty past. In the 8th year of Heaven's selection, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue, Zhao Mingzhen, was arrogant and looked down on everyone. He was widely criticized and was banished to the Han River to serve as the magistrate. During his tenure, he didn't repent but became even more arrogant. He practiced favoritism and embezzled countless money. He was too extravagant to talk about. He secretly imitated Gu Meng Changjun and recruited 3,000 followers. Among the 3,000 followers, there was a man named Yuan Tianwang. He failed many times and regretted that he didn't get the chance. He went to the Han River Prefecture and joined the Zhao sect. He became the Zhao sect's lackey. He repeatedly proposed evil plans to win the Zhao sect's trust and gradually became the Zhao sect's left and right hand. The 15th year of Heaven's selection, Zhao Mingzhen appeared in the world. He couldn't resist the fear and committed suicide. Yuan Tianwang hid himself and was eventually captured and killed by the people. Hui Mo was shocked. You mean, this Yuan Tianwang is the Yuan Wanning who appeared in front of us today? Ning Shu closed the book and nodded quietly. Her fingertips were trembling slightly, but her words were heavy and powerful. Yes, I've been thinking about this series of crimes. These 2 strange silver ingots, the crazy teacher who was not afraid of death, Xiao Yunyi's sudden change in attitude, and those children who appeared and disappeared in front of our eyes. These seemingly messy clues seemed to be related to each other. When I saw the fire with my own eyes, I suddenly connected them all together and got confirmation. They are all closely related to Zhao Mingzhen, who committed suicide 10 years ago. The Yuan Wanting today is Yuan Tianwang. He set up this case 10 years ago with only one purpose, to clear Zhao Mingzhen's name. Because the dog official with the surname Zhao, who was reviled and despised by the people, suffered the biggest injustice in the world. Chapter 6:12. Hui Mo subconsciously stood up and retorted. His head hit the roof of the carriage, and he didn't even have time to rub it. What are you talking about? How is that possible? But he was also at a loss when he said that, because all kinds of clues had already pointed to this speculation. Ning Shu raised her hand and quietly poured a cup of tea. The transparent water fell into the blue teacup after the rain, stirring up a series of ripples on the surface of the water. She dipped her slightly cold fingers in the tea and left a mark on the dark table where her fingertips touched. I began to suspect that it started from the fire at the pier last night. Generally speaking, the murderer of a serial case will have 2 patterns of behavior. One is that the first time he commits a crime, he will be greatly satisfied and believe that this way of committing the crime is very safe, so he will commit one case after another. The second pattern is that the murderer's mentality becomes more and more twisted and crazy with each crime. In order to seek greater stimulation, he will break the original bottom line step by step and adopt a more crazy way of committing the crime to create greater fear and attract more attention. But this serial case is completely different from the other 2. Did you notice? The first 4 children had all disappeared without a trace, and only then did their relatives realize it. Only the last case, Xiaoyuan, Qinxin, and Zimo, The three children, who were just over 10 years old, caused such a huge commotion. In front of hundreds of us, they managed to escape from the fire and save people, causing a huge commotion in the city. Wasn't he afraid that such a big movement would cause the children to have an accident and fail, or accidentally leave behind something that could be used against him? Such a sudden and risky way of committing the crime. Was it because he had to do it and wanted to convey something to me? At that time, I thought so, but it was just a guess. In the afternoon, I saw the little fatty Qian Dongbao turn into smoke again in front of our eyes, as if it was another fresh big change of a living person, but with a slightly different prop. The first time, I may have thought too much, but 2 times in a row, I have to think carefully. She raised her head and looked at Hui Mo. Do you remember what you said to me when we were eating noodles in the morning? When the famine broke out, His Majesty was extremely shocked. He immediately sent 6 departments to provide disaster relief, and also sent the 200,000 newly minted official silver to the Hanjiang government to solve the crisis. However, as soon as it reached the Hanjiang government treasury, before he could spend a single ingot, it all mysteriously disappeared the next morning. Wasn't that another method of transforming a living person? He has been reminding us in this way. But everyone said that he was embezzling. Moreover, after he committed suicide to escape punishment, he left behind a large pile of accounts of corruption, each with his own signature. After his death, we also found half of the dirty silver in the cellar under his bed. Ning Shu's eyes drifted like the wind to the 2 silver ingots that she had smashed. She whispered, "What if there was never 200,000 silver ingots, and only 100,000 silver ingots?" No, no. Ning Shu nodded heavily. Yes, never. Guillermo was stunned. His mouth seemed to be stuffed by someone, and he couldn't say a word. Then why did he plead guilty? She even took the initiative to sign her name? Was he crazy? Or was he threatened by someone? My God, my God. He felt that his brain was about to explode, and he couldn't describe his feelings at the moment. Chapter 613. What? All the people we sent are dead? In the imperial uncle's residence, the current imperial uncle, Wan Zhengwei, smashed an inkstone on the guard's face. Trash. My Chow family has raised a bunch of trash for nothing. 6 people tried to steal 2 silver ingots but failed. Instead, they were caught red-handed. What use do I have for you? Why don't you just die? The guard kowtowed repeatedly, his eyes red. Please forgive us, imperial uncle. They were already on the verge of success, but who would have thought that Xiahou Qing would be so nosy? He actually killed his way out halfway, completely ignoring the internal palace medallions on our brothers. He killed all of us on the spot and stole the silver ingots, leaving their corpses in the wilderness. When I went to collect their bodies, I couldn't bear it. They died so miserably. Chao Zhengwei frowned in annoyance and supported his forehead on the desk with his hand. I've heard about the girl of the Ning family for a long time. Once she gets the silver ingot, the secret of that year can't be hidden anymore. With the support of Xiahou Qing, the rebellious son, I'm afraid our Chao family will be in trouble. We were too careless at the beginning. We didn't expect that the disappearance of the children and the demon steel in the imperial mausoleum were all Yuan Tianwang's tricks. His target was not the Empress from the beginning, but us behind her. What's even more infuriating is that in order to help the Empress escape, we even helped the imperial court put up bounties everywhere. We made the case more and more famous. I'm so angry. He was so angry that he slammed his hand on the armrest. He didn't break the armrest, but he almost fainted from anger. A slightly younger figure leisurely walked over and helped him up. He smiled and comforted him. Father, there's no need to be so angry. You didn't kill that audacious Yuan Tianwang and hurt yourself instead. That wouldn't be nice. Looking at his second son, who was also the smartest among his sons, Chao Zhengwei sighed and said, "What I'm afraid of isn't anger. What I'm afraid of is that once this matter is exposed, it won't be as simple as being stabbed in the back. When that time comes, my entire Chao family will be destroyed." Chao Huayu stood up with a fan in his hand. He sloppily sat cross-legged on the Taishu chair. Squinting his eyes, he laughed and said, "What is father afraid of? Things haven't reached the worst point yet, have they? The Empress and the Sixth Prince are definitely on our side. Otherwise, the Sixth Prince wouldn't have immediately detained Yuan Tianwang after noticing the problem and sent someone to inform us of it. Now that the Supreme Court's vault has been burned by us, all the accounts books, files, and evidence have been burned to ashes. Who will be able to discover the problems in the accounts books? Even if they wanted to overturn the case, they needed evidence." I don't believe that 2 silver ingots can cause any trouble. We can just insist that they forged the 2 silver ingots. Moreover, Yuan Tianwang was currently in prison. Back then, Zhao Mingjin was able to commit suicide for fear of punishment. Today, Yuan Wanting repeatedly committed serious crimes and framed the current empress of the nation. After being arrested, he was terrified and walked the same path as Zhao Mingjin. What was there to be confused about? I don't believe that after Yuan Tianwang's death, he will be able to crawl out of hell and continue to instruct those little bastards to go against us. He was very young, and his facial features were gentle. However, it was because of this that such words coming from his mouth made people's hair stand on end. Even Chao Jingwei couldn't help but look at him from the side. After thinking for a while, he patted his shoulder and said, Father and your aunt didn't misjudge you. Compared to you, father is old and has lost the decisiveness of the past. Then, we will act according to this plan. Remember, we must eliminate the weeds and the roots. We must not leave any evidence behind. If necessary, we must eliminate those children as well. Otherwise, there will be no end to the trouble. Chao Huayu closed his fan and stood up with a smile. Father, don't worry. Your son will not disappoint you. Anyone who dares to threaten my Chao family will regret living in this world. Chapter 6:14. In the carriage, Huiyamo was shocked for a long time. If Zhao Mingjin was really wronged, then all the hatred he had for the past 10 years wasn't for the wrong person? Wasn't the countless people of Hanjiang Prefecture scolding the wrong person? Those people who wanted to take his body out and whip it after he died. It wasn't enough to cut off his head. They wanted to kill his entire family and not leave anyone alive. What was this? Huimo's mind was a mess, and he couldn't organize his words. A thought suddenly flashed through his mind, and he put his hands on the table and shouted, "Not good!" No wonder Xiao Yuni was in a hurry to take Yuan Wanting away. He didn't want to solve the case. He wanted to kill him. Let's go to Yang Qingwai and ask for him. I'll send a whistling arrow to inform the crown prince and let him lead all the brothers in the Wang Fu to confront him. He anxiously turned around, wanting to urge his horse to rush to the Dragon City Guard's camp as fast as possible to correct the next mistake that was about to happen. But before he could go out, his arm was grabbed by Ning Shu. Calm down. Right now, His Majesty is seriously ill and doesn't have the ability to care about the court. Most of the power in the palace is controlled by the Empress. Your Nanping Wang Fu may be the leader in Yunnan Province, but Huiyamo, this is the capital with 60,000 Yang Qingwai. If you let your crown prince fight the Empress alone, not only will you not be able to save Yuan Wanting, you will also push your crown prince into the fire pit. Right now, we have no other choice but to rely on another force. Ning Shu bit her lips so hard that it almost broke. Countless thoughts appeared in her mind at the same time, urging her to weigh the pros and cons and make the best decision. What force? Ning Shu's eyes were sharp, and she made a decision instantly. The fourth prince, Xiao Yunsu. Are you kidding me? Xiao Yunsu, that crazy person, is not a good person, and he has always been at odds with my crown prince. Why would he listen to us so easily? He will. Ning Shu's eyes were firm and determined. There are no eternal enemies in this world, and no eternal friends. I knew he wasn't a good person, but he was the only one who had the ability and was the most suitable person to fight against the Empress. Huiyamo, I want you to find Tianwen immediately and ask him to think of a way to pass this case to Xiao Yunsu's ears. Even if he guesses that we were the ones who leaked the news, as long as he still has the ambition to fight for that supreme throne, then he will definitely not give up this great opportunity to bring down the Chao family and Xiao Yuni in one fell swoop. This is his chance, and also our last chance. Go. Huiyamo immediately jumped out of the carriage, untied the harness, and jumped into the carriage. When he was about to leave, he turned back and said worriedly, "If I leave, what will happen to you too? What if there's another sneak attack?" Ning Shu shouted, "Don't worry, I have my ways. Don't hesitate, let's go." Good. You must be careful. Huiyamo didn't delay any longer. He tightened the reins and merged into the golden afterglow of the sky. In the carriage, Ning Shu closed her eyes and prayed silently in her heart. She prayed that God would at least open his eyes once. Just once, just once. Don't let this world not see any justice. However, God was ruthless after all. Ning Shu and Zigue waited from Yushur to Shushur, and from the evening until the sky turned dark. When they returned to Huiyamo, their eyes were red and filled with tears. He trembled as he climbed down from the horse and walked in front of Ning Shu. We were still one step too late. When Xiao Yunsu brought people to the camp to rescue Yuan Wanning was already dead. Yang Chengwei gave the cause of death as suicide. He hung his belt on the beam and ended his life. It was the same cause of death as Zhao Mingzhen that year. The same cause of death. What was this? This was the loudest and most sarcastic slap in their face. Chapter 6:15. From the moment Xiao Yuni snatched her away, we were destined to lose the opportunity. What should not have happened had happened. After struggling for a while, they finally succumbed to the ruthlessness of fate. An indescribable emotion surged in her chest, making the corners of Ning Shu's eyes turn red uncontrollably. Layers of guilt crushed Hui Mo's shoulders. He squatted on the ground and hugged his head. When I came to catch him, he had already foreseen what was waiting for him. Why didn't he run away at that time? Why didn't he run away? Tell me, if I hadn't been in a hurry to catch him, and had asked him more questions and listened to him a little more, would the result have been different? He wouldn't have had to die. It's all my fault for being too rash. Why didn't I grow a brain? Why didn't I grow a brain? Ning Shu took a deep breath and walked to Huimo's side. She patted his head gently. Huimo, don't blame yourself. It's not any of our fault, and it's not your fault either. It's because he wanted to die. Huimo lowered his head and looked at the silent ground under his feet. Drops of water flowed down his chin and soaked them silently. He wiped his face hard and said, "Lady Ning, you said that heaven and earth are heartless and treat all things as dogs. Then shouldn't it treat all things equally and not be particularly good to anyone and not particularly bad to anyone? But why does it always bully honest people?" Ning Shu opened her mouth but did not say anything. She quietly looked up at the towering sky above her head. It was cloudy today, and there was not even a star. The strong dark blue piled up layer by layer, turning into a terrifying darkness. It was so dark that she could not see her fingers in front of her, as if there was no trace of light in the world. She stubbornly raised her head and looked directly at the darkness, as if she was confronting it silently. Heaven is unfair. Then we will abandon it. Anyway, I, Ning Shu, have never believed in it. After not blinking for a long time, the water in her eyes was dried by the wind. It made her eyes hurt, but it also made her eyes burst with an unyielding light, like a burning sun. She said, "The more people want to take away the justice in this world, the more I want to take it back with my own hands. The more people want to bury the truth, the more I want it to be exposed in broad daylight. Since God has closed his eyes, then we will climb to the sky and dig 2 holes, forcing him to open his eyes and look at the world. As long as we are still alive." The 3 hands were tightly clasped together. As long as we are still alive. This night was destined to be a sleepless one. Imperial Uncle's residence. Seeing that Chao Huayu had returned, Chao Zhengwei couldn't wait to greet him and whispered, "Have you dealt with them?" Chao Huayu leisurely walked into the room and picked up a unique Ru Kiln cerulean teapot from the table. He poured himself a cup of tea and slowly drank it before saying, "Father, do you still not trust your son?" As a son, he naturally wouldn't dare to disappoint his father. Before the fourth prince arrived at the barracks, your son took action and killed him. Then, I pretended to hang myself and wrote a confession letter like Zhao Mingzhen. When the fourth prince rushed in and saw the confession letter, he couldn't say a single word. He suffered a great loss and left with an ashen face. Then, did you go into the palace and report this matter to your aunt? Of course. Aunt was very angry at first. That girl from the Ning family and Xiahou Qing dared to scheme against her. She had to find a chance to get rid of them completely. Then, my aunt greatly praised Akin for his prompt decision to extinguish the ashes that had reignited, completely cutting off any chance of it reigniting. He resolved our Chao family's predicament and also resolved her predicament. However, my aunt also expressed her worries. It's true that Yuan Tianwang's mouth was destroyed, but this case has a wide range of implications. Everyone in the capital is talking about it. If we don't give it a proper conclusion, it'll be difficult to stop the world from talking. Chao Huayu smiled and looked as if he was devising a strategy. It's very easy. Tomorrow at noon, in front of the Meridian Gate, the Ministry of Justice, the Supreme Court, and the Inspectorate will sit together and announce Yuan Tianwang's crimes to the world. After his death, we'll cut off the tongues of Lu Laosan and his family and order them to sign the confession letter on the spot. When the time comes, we'll confirm Yuan Tianwang's crimes. Chao Zhengwei nodded. After a while, he turned around and said, "But that Ning girl is not a soft persimmon. She's full of thorns. What if she jumps out and destroys us? Tomorrow, I'll place hundreds of pairs of eyes near the Meridian Gate. Whoever dares to go against our Chao family, don't blame me for being ruthless." Chao Huayu mysteriously curled his lips. His eyes were filled with a sinister look that didn't match his appearance. As for that Ning Shu, father, don't worry. Akin promises that she won't dare to come out and make trouble tomorrow. Instead, she'll obediently cooperate with us and put on this show until the end, because she has no other choice. Chapter 616. Little animals born in the wild seem to have the best intuition in the world, which was why they could grow up smoothly. Children who had not yet reached adulthood looked silly, but they had a sharpness unimaginable to adults. Qian Dongbao lay quietly in the small and cramped space, listening to the movements outside. He heard the voice of the big sister, who looked white and thin, with long eyelashes, sharp and gentle, leading people to look for him. He knew that her name was Ning Shu. The headmaster had warned him that she might be the only person in the world who could help them, so the headmaster had asked him to pass his most precious thing to her. He heard the sounds of fighting outside again. Ping ling pang lang. The sound was so scary that he didn't dare to move. He almost peed in his pants. However, he remembered that he was 8 years old this year and was a little boy. If he peed in his pants like this, he would be laughed at by his parents when he went back. Then the yard became quiet again, as if everyone had left. But he still dared not move. He waited for a long time until his legs were swaying and his body was soaked in sweat. Then he dared to climb out of the narrow space carefully. He hid behind the screen and looked around. When he was absolutely sure that there was no one in the yard and it was absolutely safe, he dared to run out of the academy along the wall like a little mouse. On the way back, he heard many people discussing their case. Every conjecture was spread like wildfire. He did not dare to listen to a single word. He deliberately made his face dirty like Zimo and the rest, disguising himself as a little beggar and slipping away from everyone's eyelids. He smelled that the people beside him had just finished cooking dinner. The fragrance floated a mile away and made his stomach growl. He was surprised to see a man who looked like his father at the end of the street. He bent his back and seemed to be asking the passers-by about something. He almost couldn't hold back his tears, but he still forced himself to sniffle and quickly ran into the alley. When he passed by a tea house, he heard a certain piece of news. His whole body swayed 3 times, as if he had lost his soul. He forcefully bit the back of his hand to force himself to take a step forward. When he finally ran into Zheng Dafeng, there was a dilapidated little house in the depths of the alley. Qian Dongbao saw a tall and thin man with white hair on his temples. The man was bending over to cook dinner for others. Qian Dongbao's tears immediately fell. When the other children saw him, they all ran over in surprise. Qinqin apologized. Dongbao, Dongbao, what happened to you? Was he frightened? Or did he meet some bad people? It's all our fault. We're older than you. We should be the ones going out. Dongbao just cried and didn't say anything. The tall and thin man walked over and bent down to gently wipe away his tears with his sleeve. Dongbao, do you miss your father and mother? Dongbao choked with sobs and shook his head. With blurred eyes, he said, Teacher, the headmaster of academy has left. The children widened their eyes in shock. Their tender little faces revealed expressions of disbelief. Then, they lowered their heads and sobbed at the same time. The thinnest and smallest Ling, lay on Qinxin's body and sobbed, Teacher, Teacher. The man closed his weathered eyes in grief. He held Dongbao's soft body in his arms and said in a hoarse voice, Don't cry, children. This is what your headmaster said. He didn't die, but reunited with Lord Zhao. However, those of us who are still alive still have to persevere. All of you are the best children in the world. Your headmaster of academy wouldn't want to see you crying in the underworld. So, let's all smile, okay? Dinner is ready. It's the dumplings that we made together in the afternoon, including the headmaster's share. The children wiped away their tears and squeezed out a tearful smile with difficulty. Okay, including the headmaster's share. Everyone laughed and gathered together to eat the dumplings happily. Not long after they put down their chopsticks, Dongbao, Mian, and the rest started to feel sleepy. The children fell asleep one by one, and no one could wake them up. Only the tall and thin man stood there quietly and looked at them silently. Zimo, Qinxin, and Xiaoyuan opened their eyes silently and walked behind him. Chapter 617. Once again pushing open the door of Aoshuang Academy, Ning Shu re-examined this dilapidated house that could only be described as shabby with the flickering light of the torch in her hand. It was as if she was examining the lazy teacher who only spoke a few words to her in a hurry and who reeked of alcohol. At first glance, he did not look like a good person. Now, she wanted to get to know him again, but she no longer had the chance. Her footprints stepped on the courtyard where the children usually played, and then walked past the short stone block under the gloomy locust tree. She walked past the lanterns in the corner that were pierced by swords and knives. She also walked past the praying mats that were kicked over by the officials. She carefully scrutinized each and every one of them. Ning Shu said, We have never known him. Or in the past 10 years, he has never let anyone know him. Over the years, he has pretended to be a complete scoundrel, addicted to alcohol, immoral, and profit-seeking. He has been so successful in his disguise that even his students have been deceived by him. And we have also fallen into the misunderstanding of peering at the leopard through a tube. However, he has never been such a person. If he really worships the strong and tramples on the weak, then why are the few worthless lanterns sent by Qian Dongbao's family piled up in this corner and not thrown away after being scorched by the sun? If he is really addicted to money, why is he willing to be kind and extend the deadline for a few days when his students can't pay the tuition fees? If he is really a bad person, fierce and frightening, how dare his students climb the tree, skip school, laugh, and refute his presumptuousness in his class? A cold face, pretended sharp words, and a careless attitude. His mask is so real that he has really kept all of us in the dark. Wei Mo and Zigue followed behind. They only felt their throats choking. No one could say anything. Only the tall locust tree made a silent answer. Ning-Shu walked to the corner of the wall and picked up a lantern that had been punctured with holes by the officials. She lit it up with a match and watched as the wick made a faint sound after being ignited. It jumped twice and turned into a large ball of light that illuminated the area in front of her. Come, let's go in and look around. Let's see what other secrets Yuan Wanting has hidden here. Zigui nodded. The three of them once again ascended the short stone steps. They passed through the empty hall and arrived at Yuan Wanting's living room. Huiyamo said with certainty, Qian Dongbao must have disappeared here. At that time, after the little fat boy handed the things to us for his teacher, he ran away without saying anything. I chased after him at the front. Then I saw the little fat boy running in with my own eyes. I also heard the sound of the screen being pushed. If it wasn't him, could it be a ghost? But this house is only so big. We've searched every nook and cranny of this house, but we still can't find where the little fatty is hiding. It's really amazing. Ning-Shu said, Yuan Wanting's every move has a profound meaning. Before he died, he arranged for Qian Dongbao to give us the item, and then he disappeared right under our noses. It's definitely not as simple as playing with us. Is he trying to reveal some of our secrets through this? Huiyamo muttered. Since he wanted to tell us the secret, why didn't he just say it directly? He tried his best to test us and gave us a series of difficult questions. Isn't he deliberately embarrassing us? There was no wind in the midsummer night. Just by standing there, they were drenched in sweat. It felt like water could be wrung out of their bodies. Ning-Shu loosened her collar by about an inch and said, because he can't completely trust us. After 10 long years of waiting, we may be a rare bit of expectation for him. However, we are complete strangers, and we have not even met once. How can he place all his hopes on us? After all, there are so many people in this world who appear to be gentlemen but are actually devils. Let's look around carefully. There must be hidden mechanisms in this house that we haven't found yet. Chapter 6:18. 7 or 8 lanterns lit up the messy house. Huiyamo buried his head in the storeroom. Zigui leaned against the wall and touched every brick. Ning-Shu focused on the living room. The three of them did their jobs and turned the dilapidated house upside down again. 10 years ago, 20 taels of silver disappeared overnight and no one noticed it. Today, little fatty Qian Dongbao disappeared in front of them. If there was no connection, then Ning-Shu had been eating and investigating the case for nothing all these years. But where was the answer to the last problem that Yuan Wanting had set for them? Ning-Shu frowned. She squatted on the ground and touched the corners of the bed countless times, but found nothing again. Out of the corner of her eye, she inadvertently caught sight of a biography scattered under the bed. She suddenly thought of something, got up and said to Huiyamo, Huiyamo, I remember you said that Yuan Wanting said something strange when he was caught. Huimo's head just popped out from under a broken pot. His face was covered in ashes. He turned back and said, yes, he said that the prison food in the Dali Temple was good. But even if he ate prison food, he wouldn't be able to eat here. Ning-Shu shook her head. It's not this sentence. Think about it again. It's not this sentence. Huiyamo thought for a while and said, oh, then it's that sentence. Since you're here, you don't have to use the knife. I'll go with you. But although my house is poor, the pile of books is still worth a few copper coins. Don't mess them up. I still have to sell them to exchange for wine when I come back. That's what he said. What's wrong? Do you suspect that there's something wrong with these books? But I flipped through them and even compared the handwriting on them with Yuan Wanting's. There's no mark or trace. And these books have been lying here. If there's something wrong with them, Xiao Yunyi's subordinate Yang Chengwei would have taken them away long ago. Under the warm orange light, Ning-Shu's face was covered in sweat, as if she had just been fished out of the water. However, her eyes were increasingly calm, like 2 crystals that had been polished and shone brighter. Her gaze fell on the 3 extremely shabby bookshelves, and she said in a low voice, what if he's not talking about the books on the bookshelves? but the bookshelves where these books are placed. Huiyamo blinked and asked Zigui to come forward to check. When they pushed the second bookshelf, they found something strange. Wait, why can't this bookshelf be pushed? There must be a mechanism inside. When they pulled out a wooden plank from the bottom of the bookshelf, they finally found an unusual protrusion in a hidden corner. With a gentle press of their fingers, only a faint muffled sound was heard. The brick wall that originally separated the living room and the utility room actually slid to the left, along with the door that led to the utility room. It overlapped with the wall and slowly separated until the dust settled, revealing half of a brand new doorway. And through this mysterious half of the doorway, they actually saw another incomparably dark and narrow space. It was less than a foot wide and could only allow an adult to enter sideways. But this narrow space was enough to hide the biggest secret in the world. That's the slingshot on Little Fatty. Huiyamo took a closer look and hurriedly ran over to pick up the wooden slingshot on the ground. He was hiding here just now. How can this Yuan wanting be so capable? It's. Who would have guessed that this shabby yard, which even beggars wouldn't look at more than a few times, actually hid such an uncanny workmanship? Huiyamo was stunned and couldn't close his mouth. I'm afraid that even the best craftsmen in the Ministry of Works can't make such a mechanism. It's flawless. Ningxu shook her head and said, "Don't forget, his ancestors were extremely famous craftsmen. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been chosen to repair the imperial mausoleum based on his ancestors' reputation. This person, he's really a rare genius." However, he was a rare genius, and in the end, God was jealous of him. Today, after enduring humiliation for 10 years, he finally ushered in the underworld. So far, all the big mysteries had been solved, but the people who were hiding still didn't want to come out of the darkness. The air was so stuffy that it made people panic. The rainstorm accumulated in the clouds seemed to be about to hit them together with the unreachable thing above their heads at any time. But it didn't come down. It was like a sharp sword hanging in the sky, ready to pierce the illusion of the world at any time. Chapter 619. Time unknowingly came to midnight. There were only 12 hours left before the trial at noon. Ningxu said solemnly, "Huiyamo, I want to ask you for a favor." Huiyamo said casually, "Lady Ning, what kind of relationship do we have? You don't have to be so polite. Just say it." Ningxu no longer pretended to be polite and went straight to the point. "I know that your Wang Fu has control over the 9 states and 6 prefectures. You command the 8 extremes and have great magical powers. In particular, your Shitzi has prepared for a rainy day and planted countless spies in various places. Little brother Tianwen is the chief among them. So I would like to ask you to pass on a message for me. I would like to trouble him to make a trip overnight and help me transport something from the Hanjiang prefecture back to the capital. In the process of transport, they may encounter great obstacles and may even lose their lives. Please remind them to be careful." Huiyamo patted his chest and promised. His eyes were as bright as stars. "Don't worry, I promise you. As long as it can solve the case, I will not refuse." After Huiyamo left, there were only 2 people left in the empty academy, Ningxu and Zigui. This was the darkest time of the day, a heavy weight pressing down on her heart. Only the center of the broken lantern silently and gently scattered soft light, shining on Ningxu's almost transparent face. Zigui's eyes were calm. He pointed at Ningxu's tired eyes with concern and wrote on her palm, "Miss, there are still 3 hours before dawn. Let's sleep for a while. You are too tired. It's useless to stay up. It's better to have a good rest. Don't collapse first." Ningxu smiled and nodded. "I'll do it. My dear Zigui, I'll listen to you." They didn't want to waste time running back and forth, so they drove the carriage into Aoshuang Academy and stayed in the carriage. Fortunately, the summer night was hot, and they didn't have to worry about catching a cold. Ningxu and Zigui shared a thin blanket, but they didn't feel at ease. There were all kinds of strange illusions in their dreams. There was Yuan Wanting, whose neck was broken and hung on the beam. He stared back at her silently, as if asking her why she didn't help him solve the case. Why didn't she help him solve the case? Her mother sat alone in the prison. Her originally thin and weak body had lost a lot of weight, leaving only a thin layer of skin and flesh. She quietly looked at her and did not speak. Only her pair of eyes continuously flowed with tears, as if saying, "Mother's little shoer, don't tell me you don't want me anymore? Do you want to watch your mother die with your eyes wide open?" There was Empress Chao sitting on the phoenix seat with a ruthless face. She asked her why she promised to help her solve the problem, but stood on the opposite side of her and became her enemy. Then don't blame her for being ruthless. There was also a woman wearing a mask holding a sword. She walked over with a grin and pierced her chest with a sword. In the end, there were 7 children of different heights. Some were fat and some were thin. They held hands and stood side by side on the city wall of the Meridian Gate. Then, they jumped down together. Their tender and soft bodies fell into a pool of bloody mud. White brain matter mixed with eyeballs rolled down. The hot red blood rushed out of their broken bodies and covered her feet, wanting to drown her whole body. No, she didn't want this. No, who would pull her out? Who would help her stop all of this? She screamed in her dream, trying her best to stop the bloody scene in front of her, but her whole body was stuck in the mud and she couldn't pull it out. Such a big fear made her whole body twitch in pain, and tears came out of the corners of her eyes. Just as she was about to be swallowed up by the huge fear, a melodious flute sound came from the short courtyard wall and passed through the thin wall of the carriage. It gently brushed into her sleep, so warm and so powerful. In her nightmare, Ning Shu clearly saw the most gentle hand in the world quietly appear in front of her, gently wiping away every inch of her fear and anxiety, wiping away every drop of tears on her face. Then, holding her hand, gently and firmly led her out of the terrible dream. She raised her head to see what the owner of that hand looked like, but that hand gently covered her eyes, blocking her sight. Then, it dropped the warmest kiss on her forehead. There was no more fear in her world, no other desire. Chapter 620. After sleeping for 2 or 3 hours, Ning Shu opened her eyes again before dawn. The rain that had accumulated for the whole night still hadn't fallen. The air was stuffy like a steamer. Even breathing made people feel flustered. Since Huema left last night, he hadn't returned for the whole night. Perhaps he was tied up by something, and they still couldn't find any new clues about the case. Ironically, in just one night, the news that the villain who kidnapped the children and slandered the Empress had been executed had spread throughout the capital. Even without deliberately asking, people could see the white-haired old peddlers on the streets and alleys gathered in groups of 3 or 5 to talk about it. Have you heard? Have you heard? The serial case of the kidnapping of children has been solved. Guess who the murderer is? It's actually a teacher. That's just too crazy. He even deceived the children. How can there be such a vicious person in the world? It's simply outrageous. You don't know. That's not a simple teacher. 10 years ago, do you still remember the dog official surnamed Zhao in the Hanjiang prefecture? He committed all kinds of evil. He embezzled a total of 200,000 taels of silver and hanged himself. This teacher surnamed Yuan is the confidant of that dog officer Zhao. Back then, he escaped death by slipping out of his shell and has been hiding in our capital all this time. His goal is to bring chaos to the world and avenge his master. Oh, that teacher used to come to my shop to buy wine and help me write a few characters. I thought he was a good person. That's why it's said that you may know a person for a long time without understanding his heart. The more harmless a person looks, the more likely he is not a good person. I have a little nephew who studied with this teacher. I heard that the teacher was taken away by the officials yesterday. My whole family was scared stiff. My little nephew cried all night and dreamed that the teacher was coming to take him away. Don't worry. That guy was taken away by the officials. He knew that he couldn't escape death and hanged himself. He can't do evil anymore. It's a pity that he didn't want to reveal the whereabouts of the children he kidnapped. Alas, I'm afraid they were already killed by him. When I passed by the entrance of the government office, I saw that the officials posted a notice outside. It said that this afternoon, the 3 departments at the entrance of the Meridian Gate will jointly investigate the case and give an explanation to the people of the city. How is that enough? This dog thief had committed such a heinous crime, causing unrest in the capital for the past few days. Hanging himself would be too easy for him. If you ask me, you should pull out his corpse and flog it. You're right. Death by 1,000 cuts. Cut him into 8 pieces. No, we should grind his bones and scatter his ashes so that he can never be reincarnated. Ha 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 ha. Ning Shu did not want to listen to the rest of the conversation. She pulled Zigue and hurriedly left the breakfast shop. Listening to those people's crazy and almost irrational remarks, Zigue lost his appetite. He couldn't swallow the half-eaten bun in his hand anymore and threw it at the feet of the red-eyed, spittle-flying person. That person was jumping up and shouting happily. Suddenly, he stepped on the meat stuffing and fell flat on his face. Then, he cursed loudly. Zigue ignored him. He rolled his eyes coldly and followed Ning Shu with his head held high and his chest puffed out. Zigue pulled Ning Shu's sleeve and gestured worriedly. Miss, there are only 3 sick hen left until noon. How are we going to investigate this case? Let's go to the medical center first. Ning Shu's expression was very calm. She let the gossip around her say that people's hearts were like ghosts. She remained unmoved, because it was not worth it at all. She said, Tan Shaoqing is seriously injured. We haven't had time to visit him yet. We should at least express our sincerity. While we're at it, we can also take a look at those few little beggars from Zhengdefang. Perhaps there will be an unexpected harvest. Zigue continued to gesture suspiciously. What harvest? Ning Shu naturally did not have the leisure to keep him in suspense. Her eyes flashed. She lightly opened her thin lips. Her voice was clear and crisp like pearls and jade. Do you still remember before? One of the little boys called June unintentionally said something? He said, Qinxin Jeje's father was obviously a very good person, but he was framed for stealing money and had his head chopped off. This father, could it be that he was referring to Zhao, Ming, Zhen? Perhaps the answer will come soon. Chapter 621. Young Dr. Shun, I beg you to let me go. I'm not dizzy now. I'm very well. I really don't need to stay in the clinic anymore. You see, there are so many patients outside. It's better for me to make room for people who need it more. Tan Siwei begged the cold-faced girl in front of the bed with a bitter face. He almost cried for her. He had never thought that although he, Tan Siwei, could not be considered an important official in the imperial court, he was still an official. There would be a day when he would grovel and beg someone so humbly. The girl in front of him was none other than another heroine in the capital. She was the most famous female doctor in Ran Medical Hall and the only daughter of Chen Ziqing, the governor of Jingji, Shan Yan. This girl was 17 years old. She was elegant and beautiful. She should have been a noble lady, but she was obsessed with medicine at a young age. Since then, she didn't wear any makeup and didn't like to dress up. Instead, she read medical books and held silver needles. Because of this, her father, Chen Ziqing, was so angry that he vomited 3 liters of blood. This girl decisively wrote a prescription and broke off their relationship. She didn't change at all and stepped into the clinic. She scraped bones and treated poisons without batting an eyelid. Blood and flesh splattered everywhere. Who didn't sigh behind her back? Miss Shun, a girl is like a tiger. However, the expression of this delicate tigress did not change at all. She glanced at him coldly. She obviously had a delicate and beautiful face, but her height only reached Tan Siwei's chin. When she opened her mouth, a knife flew all over the sky. Lie down. Our Ren Medical Hall is not lacking in beds. With your weak body, do you still want to force yourself to investigate the case? Don't kill yourself before you kill the murderer. Tan Siwei had a headache, but I fainted because of the smoke that night. Then, I accidentally knocked my forehead. There wasn't even 3 to 5 drops of blood left. It had already scabbed over. If you don't believe me, I'll take off the gauze and show you. Shen Yan's murderous aura became stronger. Shut up. Are you the doctor, or am I the doctor? I said you haven't recovered yet, so you haven't recovered. Use the silver needles again. Tan Siwei subconsciously withdrew one of his legs from the bed. He wanted to cry but had no tears. Just then, there was a gurgling sound from the medicine stove. Shen Yin poured the medicine into a bowl with a cold face and brought it to Tan Siwei. Open your mouth. Looking at another bowl of bitter medicinal soup, the corners of Tan Siwei's mouth twitched. He was heartbroken. It's hot. Shen Yin rolled her eyes and muttered, You're a grown man, yet you're so afraid of hardship since you were young. However, despite her disgust, she still blew on the medicinal soup to cool it down. All right, it's not hot anymore. Drink it. Unable to escape, Tan Siwei let out a long sigh of sorrow in his heart. He swallowed the scalding bitter medicine along with his tears. He thought for a moment, then suddenly said, By the way, little Shindafu, how did you know I was investigating a case? Shen Yan's slender figure stiffened for some reason. She turned around and put the empty bowl on the table to cover it up. She said casually, Of course I guessed it. You were hurriedly sent here by the officers of the Supreme Court for treatment the night before last. Your body was covered in ashes and burns. If you were not investigating a case, how could you be injured like this? Moreover, many people come and go in my clinic every day. What's so strange about hearing someone mention it by chance? I see. Tan Siwei nodded. Since you've taken the medicine, you should have a good rest first. Shen Yin quietly exhaled and went out with the bowl of medicine. However, when she stepped out of the door, she pursed her lips and took out a small jar of candied fruit from her arms. She said lightly, By the way, when I was treating a child just now, he specially gave me a jar of candied fruit as the consultation fee. I don't like sweets since I was a child. It's a waste to keep it. If you need it, I'll give it to you. The words if you need it were written all over Tan Siwei's face. However, he deliberately cleared his throat in order to maintain his dignity as the Vice Minister of the Supreme Court. He said, I'm a man and I don't like sweets. However, it's hot in the summer and candied fruit can't be stored. If it goes bad, it won't be beautiful. Then I'll reluctantly help little Shindafu relieve his worries. Shen Yan's lips slightly curved up like spring water. She handed the candied fruit to Tan Siwei. Tan Siwei's eyes lit up. He was about to solemnly thank her when he suddenly saw Ning Shu coming in from the corner of his eyes. He was so overjoyed that he forgot to wear his shoes. He hurriedly got off the bed to greet her. Why are you here? He didn't notice Shen Yan's dim eyes. Chapter 622. Stepping through the door, Ning Shu first greeted Tan Siwei, then nodded to Shen Yan, who was wearing a plain medical gown. She smiled warmly and said, This must be Shindafu. I've long heard that you have a firm will and your reputation for practicing medicine to help people in danger. I've always wanted to meet you, but today I'm fortunate enough to see Shindafu. Many thanks to Shindafu for treating Tan Shaoqing. Ning Shu greets you. When she noticed the surprised and shy expression on Tan Siwei's face, and his eyes were completely glued to Ning Shu, there was no room for a second person. Shen Yin silently bit her lower lip. Her pair of cold, almond-shaped eyes looked at Ning Shu indifferently. She only said, Miss Ning is too polite. Shen Yin still has a patient to treat, so I'll take my leave first. She slightly bent her knees and turned to leave. When she brushed past Ning Shu, she accidentally bumped into her. Ning Shu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She rubbed her shoulder, which didn't hurt much. She sighed and said, TSK. It seems like I'm inexplicably hated by someone. What should I do? She looked at Tan Siwei, who had no idea what was going on. She thought to herself, is a source of trouble. Nowadays, men are even more worrisome than women. On the other side, Tan Siwei was still immersed in such a small injury. Ning Shu personally came to see him. Was she worried about him? She cared more about his beautiful imagination than him. He didn't know that Ning Shu had suffered an unexpected calamity because of him. He happily asked Ning Shu to sit down. Looking at his silly appearance, Ning Shu thought for a moment and probed. Did Tan Xiaoqing and Shindafu know each other before? Tan Siwei's eyes widened in surprise. After thinking for a while, he solemnly said, I don't think so. I only met Miss Shun for the first time because of my injury. Are you sure? Of course. Otherwise, how could I not have any impression of him? Tan Siwei said resolutely. So, I'm sure you've never seen him before. As soon as Tan Siwei finished speaking, he saw Shan Yin return. She had been standing at the door for a long time with a stack of clean clothes. When she saw Tan Siwei and Ning Shu looking at her, she stiffly handed the clothes over. The servants of the Ning family just sent these to the clinic. I'll pass them on for you. Take them. As for this silk hat, it's good for ventilation. You have an injury on your head, so it's not good for you to catch a cold in the near future. There's an extra one in the clinic. Take it or leave it. She quickly said a few words and stuffed the coat and hat into Tan Siwei's arms. Without waiting for his response, she turned and left. However, Ning Shu clearly saw a flash of water in her eyes. It was like a mirror that had been carefully polished and held in her arms was casually thrown to the ground and broken into pieces. Tan Siwei didn't know what was going on. He put on his shoes and chased after him. Hey, Dr. Shun, please wait a moment. I'm so grateful for Dr. Shan's careful advice. I haven't thanked you yet. Please wait a moment. Before he could catch up, the soles of his feet suddenly slipped and he fell heavily to the ground. He covered his buttocks and grimaced in pain. He had no face left. At first glance, what slipped on the ground was not something else. How could it be the string of red beans in Dr. Shun's hand? The red string broke, and the blood-like lovesickness beans scattered on the ground. It looked like the tears of a peerless beauty. Tan Siwei grabbed one and wanted to cry but had no tears. He looked at Dr. Shun, who was as cold as ice. Dr. Shin didn't look back. Only Ning Shu crossed her arms in front of her chest. She calmly watched the short drama and silently said, Serves you right. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.